SMITE Pro League, brought to us and powered by our good friends over at Alienware. If you haven't had a chance to check out all the awesome gear that our pros are playing on, not just here in the studio, but in the comfort of their own home, the computers that we use here on the desk, that our production uses back behind the scenes, then go over to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code AWSMITE09. See all the great products that Alienware has to offer, not just to our players and to us here, but also to you, the fans at home. So thank you one more time to Alienware for powering us in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League and making sure that we can play on the best gear out there possible. So thank you so much one more time over to Alienware for all of that. I'm J-Mac. I got Mifflin joining me on the desk as we jump into our second set of the day. We got the Camelot Kings and the Olympus both squaring off. And this match maybe has a little bit more weight on it than if we initially jumped into the second half of this phase than it did. I mean, back then it was Camelot Kings sitting right at the cusp of top two. Olympus Bolts were kind of battling to keep themselves clawed out of that bottom two. Now these two teams just a little bit closer in standings now, Mifflin.
Yeah, I would argue Camelot Kings looking for a bit of a comeback here, and the Olympus Bulls looking for a bit of momentum. I think that should be the conversation going into this one. The Kings, though, I think you're right, man. It has been a bit of a stumble as of recent. I mean, tough competition in the Bolts, but certainly a team that the Kings have been good at taking care of in the past.
For sure. Camelot Kings have had a rough week last week. I believe went down 0-2 during their matchups. Olympus Bolts went 2-0, if I'm not mistaken, during these. So it's been a rise up of the Bolts, and for the Camelot Kings, maybe to try and reprise that now and get their weekend kicked off as we take a look at the schedule for the remainder of our day and our weekend. Our first match was the Oni Warriors and Valhalla Valkyries. That one went to the Warriors in a pretty quick 2-0. Now it's up to the Kings and the Bolts to kind of close out our day. And then make sure that you're tuning in for the rest of the weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, triple headers. And we'll see both of these teams again over on Sunday, even after their match is done. The Oni Warriors and the Valks will also get to play again tomorrow, teams that we saw earlier on today. So make sure that you're tuning in for the entirety of this week of the SPL. And again, next week for SPL, it's going to be very similar. Another 10 matches to be played out. And all of this coming down to now the standings portion with it. Camelot Kings, 5-4. Olympus Bolts, 4-5. I mean, this is a potential point for the Olympus Bolts to bump themselves not only out of keeping themselves from the bottom two, but now potentially jumping up into that top four spot and maybe even overlapping the Kings if they can find a win here.
Yeah, if the Bolts win out in this set, I think that essentially guarantees them to not end up in bottom two whatsoever. So certainly a set that the Olympus Bolts and their fans are going to be keeping their eyes on. A lot riding on the rest of the year. In this set in particular, the Camelot Kings would like to, I suppose, retake some of their former glory and get a little bit closer to the top of the standings as well. So excited to see what comes out of this match.
Yeah, I mean, jumping into the second half of this phase, it was really close standings between the number one and then 2, 3, and 4 immediately after. I believe it was only a game separating. Now that gap is really starting to widen up. And for the Camelot Kings, they definitely want to try and regain their footing in this one. It's been a rough start to their second half of the phase, going 0-2 last week. A loss to the Dragons, that's not something you're usually too mad about there. But for them, a loss to the Valhalla Valkyries was definitely maybe a hit to the mental for the team. And it seems like it's kind of affected maybe some of their play on field a little bit with their macro play. It's something that we always talk about with the Camelot Kings, is this has always been their comeback mechanic. If they're not winning out in the team fights, well, at least they're still taking objectives. At least they're still taking scorpions. But it seems in the last couple of matchups, the Kings haven't really been able to kind of get that rolling for themselves.
Yeah, it certainly have slowed down insofar as the ability to just run down objectives or greater scorpions or gold furies like they have been able to in the past, but certainly a playstyle that I think they're very capable of playing. I think, if anything, the main problem for the Camelot Kings as of right now is some of those late-game team fights have been looking very, very disjointed. Perhaps they're having some troubles adapting to the no beats plus Aegis rule. Some teams have been having a bit of a resurgence due to it. Some teams struggling a little bit more so. I think the Kings find themselves in the latter column, as they really have not been able to figure out exactly how they want to address P's and B's in this emergent meta, for lack of a better term. But now that they've had a little bit more time to practice around it, see all these other teams and how they have adapted, perhaps the Camelot Kings have got a more clear and concise idea of how they're trying to address today's match.
And a loss up against the Dragons last week, loss to the Valkyries. Still definitely some coming up, at least for this team, to kind of bring themselves back in. Remember, these guys started out 5-2 to jump into this phase. Have found 2 losses so far to end at the 5-4, and are just close enough to falling out of the top 4 spot. Again, a win by the Olympus Bolts could push them down into that lower half of the standings, or at least put them closer to that point than what it was. Because not only was the top 4 very far up and ahead, I mean, the bottom 4 was pretty far back behind in that regard. Remember, the Titans and the Bolts, I believe, only had 2 wins to their name whenever they were coming into the second half of the phase, and Now the Titans have been finding wins, and the Bolts have been finding wins. And I think that's the biggest thing, at least now for the Olympus Bolts, has been this rise back up for themselves. It seems that they've been able to reestablish some identity for themselves. They've been getting a little bit more cohesive on the battleground, whether it comes to their macro play, whether it comes to their team fighting out there. Basket has made a big step up for this team now that he's finally starting to become a little bit more comfortable in his role.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring up Baskin because the first couple of weeks, standard performance from Baskin. You know, he comes in, he's not exactly making waves, but he's certainly holding his own, which I think is absolutely ridiculous considering how long his absence from the Pro League has been. But since then, and in his most recent sets, Baskin has really stepped up for this squad, making individual plays, stealing objectives, turning around team fights, setting up these engagements, a diverse god pool as well. So the conversation of the Olympus Bulls need to find their identity, they need to figure out how they want to play, I don't think that's the conversation anymore. Now it's finding consistency and figuring out exactly how they wish to draft as they start to move forward, because the Bolts have been looking a lot more cohesive in shot calling. They've really stepped up their objective play. The macro has been a lot cleaner, and some of these late game team fights have been very good as well. One of the primary concerns, though, is of their last couple of set wins, I would argue a bit of them have been due to some objective steals or individual hero plays. Lasbra comes to mind as a guy that can just completely dominate a lobby on his own and has done so a couple of times. But that's never a great position to be in as a team. And that's not to say that star players don't have a role in the league. They absolutely do. But when you are completely reliant on your star players having phenomenal performances every single time, that becomes draining. It's a difficult win condition to line up as well. So diversifying that win condition, I think, going to be a major point for the Olympus Bolts, and one I'll be keeping my eyes on as we start to approach Worlds.
And we haven't seen that the Olympus Bolts are kind of willing to let these games go a little bit longer to kind of get that farm online. Barracuda comes to mind with some of the picks that he's been going, and even maybe some of the build choices where these builds don't really start swinging until we get plus 30-plus minutes into the game. Takes a little bit of a while for these teams to ramp up, but we did have a chance to sit down with a couple of members of each of these teams for a pregame interview, so we'll go ahead and throw it over to that video right now.
Last couple weeks we've been getting owned, and this week we have owned. I'd say I'm pretty satisfied with the performance. We've done pretty well.
I think we pretty much in all our games, Dragons and the Valks, we didn't play particularly great. Definitely some problems coming off the break that we had. We're not really firing all cylinders at the moment, but hopefully we can scrim and work it out before Worlds.
Kings, particularly this loss to Jade Dragons. They're weak. We're getting ready to expose them this next week for the frauds they are.
I think the Bolts are actually doing a lot better now. The last a week or two, they've actually started to win some games and show some momentum. So we'll have to see. A few weeks ago, they weren't doing so good. So we'll have to just see how it goes, really.
We actually haven't beaten them in like a year and a half or something like that. We've won our last 3 sets. So we're trying to keep this win train going. So I'll be trying my absolute hardest.
I feel pretty confident. I'm pretty confident going into any team, even like this week with the Dragons and the Valks. We're pretty confident, but it's just how it is sometimes. But I'm looking forward to next week.
BMT and the Camelot Kings feeling like maybe they weren't quite playing up to their strengths as of yet in the last couple of matchups that they've had, but still feeling confident that they can take on just about any team. But I think the one thing that I took out of that one was the answer from Jake's. It's like, man, these guys are weak. We're about to expose the Kings for the frauds they are, was the phrasing that he used. How do you feel about the confidence from Jake in a statement like that?
I think that there is a thin line between confidence and bravado, and that line we'll figure out where to delineate it based on the results of this set. As of now, if you were to ask me, was it confidence or was it bravado, you gotta just think Jake's having a little bit of fun.
Potentially so. We'll see how the Olympus Bolts perform in game number 1 as we jump into the picks and bans between the Bolts and the Camelot Kings. And immediately the Kings are going to start targeting out Jake with some of those bans. Nox, the first one taken off the table. The Olympus Bolts will ban away the emojis, so sticking to the supports for now, but can't leave that dodgy open. We've seen just how powerful that god is in the jungle. The Olympus Bolts are still going to keep doubling down on their support bans. Ymir also removed from the game.
And then Susano to follow from the King, so just keeping their eyes on maybe some of the picks that the Bolts have really become associated with, the Nox support, very strong, and then otherwise, let's get rid of some of these picks that have just been really dominant over the last week or so. Daji seems to be having very good performances. Susano, I mean, brought to the limelight by Panatom, but certainly all the junglers in the league very capable of playing them in the current circumstances. Bolts round out their third ban with the Naja shot towards the King's jungler, Captain Twig. One of his best performances as of recent was on that Naja. Otherwise, Twig a bit stagnant in the jungle as of late. His last 6 games, it's been, I believe, 4 or so picks, but combined KDAs not so great. 10-0 on Naja.
That's good.
And then in the last 6, maybe the best performance after that is a 4-6 on Pele. So not exactly anything to write home about.
Yeah, it's been a bit rough in those last couple of sets for Captain Twig. The Naja definitely being the best performance, as you said, the 10-0-9. But Cupid, the first grab for the Camelot Kings, and then immediately in response, something that has been kind of the combo for the Olympus Bolts. Cernos for the mid laner, Venenu most likely, Ishtar over Barracuda in the duo lane. So both these teams grabbing carries very early out the gate as we see triple Hunter as the first 3 picks.
Yeah, I like this for the Bolts. It's been a strategy that's been working very well for them. Just draft pressure in mid and in the duo so that you have 2 lanes that you can play through pretty easily. We've seen very early rotations from Lasra towards dual lane, just towards that Scepter, and it seems like the Bolts, once they have acquired that Scepter, are pretty good at just maintaining pressure and controlling the contestable farm in the duo. Otherwise, your mid laner should be able to hold his own on these aggressive style picks like Ishtar that have got strong clear, strong poke potential, while he's waiting on Lasra to get back towards his lane. And then once you get to the late game, double Hunter, just real good right now. The ability to go the yellow numbers build or go for just standard crit. You can just do both when you have 2 Hunters.
A couple of picks that we haven't seen from the Kings in a hot minute are the Hades for variety and Terra for genetics. We look back on genetics' last 6 games or so played. Majority has been Khepri, half of those games, and 2 Horus and a Ymir. So it's been a little bit since we've seen this Terra come back out. And kind of at the start of the phase, when Faye Blessed Hoops was really on the rise, the Manticore Spike even as a combo, we were seeing a lot of Terra bans kind of thrown over the way, whether that be towards genetics or any of the other players in the league. So seeing that one come back out and coupling with the Hades, which some solo laners have conned themselves as a win condition if they can get that Hades for themselves and run that full damage build. So how do the Olympus Bolts respond now? They pick up the 3rd of their 3 carries. Pele for Lasra. It's got to feel good getting him on a powerful pick like that.
A pick that's got great mobility, chase down potential, good answers to Fields of Love. So often Cupid, when he's initiated on, just drops Field of Love at his feet and says, all right, leave me alone. If Pele is able to close gap without using that ultimate, the Volcanic Lightning, very good at immuning the Mez from that, and then also chasing down some of those dashes. So love Pele there. Even Hades, to a certain extent, going to need to play safe in lane. If he's jumping on every single wave, if he's Devour Souling every single wave, Pele's going to have an easy time rotating through and making a pretty decent punish in situations like that. The Terra lock-in, though, for the Kings is one that I'm curious about because already there's 2 cripples on the side of the Bolts. You've got Bramble Blast from CERN, and you've got the ultimate from Ishtar. And Terra is so telegraphed and when she's going to use that dash. Throw out the Monolith, probably going to dash through that, huh? Throw out the Clap, maybe you're dashing through that too. So not only do you know when she's going to dash, you know which direction she's going. So opportunities for the CERN in particular, I think, to really dampen some of those initiations from the Kings.
As the second wave of bans starts to roll through, Fenrir, the call from the Bolts, maybe to a shot over towards Captain Twig, who hasn't taken his selection just yet. Now 5 assassins deep into the pool because of it, with the Pele picked up and 4 assassin bans. Might be a little bit further for Captain Twig to dig. I'm thinking maybe Hunbats could be a good call. That seems to be a pick that usually Captain Twig defaults to when a lot of the others have been taken away, so could be a ban by the Bolts, but instead, Erlong Shen, something that Panatom's been playing a little bit recently on the Leviathans. Not something that we've really been seeing Captain Twig go back towards as of recent.
But it used to be one of his favorite picks, and certainly capable of playing it still, I'd have to assume. But you're right, Hunbots does immediately come to mind. It would fit this draft well for the Kings. Fear no evil, just instant procs Earthen Fury every single time from that Terra, so an opportunity for the Kings to take that, and it would help out with some of that initiation too, as the initiation, as of current for the Kings, is largely just going to be a massive root from Terra and then pray that there's damage behind her, or maybe a Pillars of Agony from Hades, but there are answers to that aren't beads. If your dashes are up, you're just going to make it out of those situations. So something that can burn beads consistently or make use of them would serve the Kings very, very well. Whereas the Bolts, they've got to figure out their front line. They need to figure out how they want to start these fights off themselves, whether or not it's going to be a counterpunch style draft where it's just sit in your own back line, try and peel out, or if it's to get active. With a tier, it's get active.
Now that leaves, funny enough, Jake to be the final person to grab their pick. Unless we somehow have reverted back to Jake's original days of playing support and seeing the tier go over to him. Very unlikely. I think a lot of the players either on his team and even himself have said that they don't like seeing him go towards that pick too many times. Lancelot the hover for the Kings, but it might not be at least the one for Captain Twig. With Set locked in, feels like this one could go over towards Captain Twig very easy, but some flexibility between Set and Lancelot to go either towards Variety or towards Captain Twig. You have a preference on one of these two picks for Captain Twig in the jungle?
Well, I think it is very likely just Lancelot for Twig. He's played it recently. You don't really want Hades in mid, so you probably send him over to the Soul Lane.
Oh, that's right, Hades.
And then Set mid's been pretty consistent, so line him up, knock him down style pick for the King's mid laner. Yeah, I think that's where I got it. So Hades solo, Set mid, Lancelot in the jungle. Last time we saw Lancelot for Twig was not exactly an inspiring performance. 2 and 8 on the Lancelot. So just trying his best, I suppose, to right the ship and prove that this is a threatening pick. We have seen Variety play it in the past, though, so you're right to say that there is some flex potential in that maybe you do want Hades mid. Then you've got a Lancelot in solo with a Set jungle. I don't personally love that.
Right.
But it is a potential.
I'll be honest, Hades has been banned so many times, I kind of forgot that he had gotten picked there. So.
Fair enough.
But Hades, Terra, Set, Lancelot, and Cupid for the Kings, and an Ares to round out the draft for the Bolts. As long as Ares can get a blink, great initiation, potential beads burn, and team fight start. But when we saw Aurora pick up this Ares the previous time, he's kind of defaulted to being a relic bot, never really got a chance to see ultimates come through. You think that this is a pick and a composition kind of built around for the Bolts and fighting into the Kings where this Ares has potential to shine?
I think Ares can get almost infinite value. I mean, looking at this draft, so many of the picks on the Kings are reliant on their dashes, their leaps, for primary damage. You want death from below from Hades? Good luck, you got chained. You want to dash as Lancelot? Good luck, you got chained. Do you want Set to be able to teleport in or out, as he is so apt to do because it's highly committal, go in, then I need to get out of there quickly? Good luck, you got chained. And it was easy to chain you because you jumped at me, right? Even Terra, we were talking about it earlier with just the Bramble Blast interaction on her dash. Throw up the Monolith, you're going to dash that way, chained. You know, so there's a whole lot of potential here for this Ares. But Ares has always been a very volatile pick, a pick that can either dominate the play on field, get an early lead, and now all of a sudden it's just a massive threat because he's got the damage to solo you, or it's fell behind early, oh no, I'm an Ares, I've got no way to escape. No escape, not only the name of his ultimate, but also just the conditions in which he plays the game, because he has got no mobility inherent to the kit. I think it's a volatile pick, but certainly one that can work and can get a lot of value up against the Kings. If I were an Ares player, this is a draft I'd want to play Ares into.
I mean, you're running an Ares and we'll assume Ishtar lane just because of how often CERN has gone over to Venenu in the mid role. So you have Ares Ishtar up against Cupid Terra. Not exactly a strong clear for the Camelot Kings in that early game. Meanwhile, whenever we talk to the Oni Warriors, they talk about how Ares could be a great early game start. Is that going to be the start that the Olympus Bolts need as they take on the Camelot Kings, trying to claw themselves up a little bit further in the standings? Can the Bolts do it in game number 1?
This is a big one for both of these two teams as we get towards the end of the phase. Every match matters just a little bit more. It's about building consistency at this point for the Camelot Kings. No real threat of dropping into the bottom 2. With the Valkyrie's loss earlier on today, Bolts a little bit less under threat from dropping into the bottom 2, but still mathematically could happen if a loss streak for them or any of the other teams really start to build up. Point being, Trelly, is that the Kings and the Bolts need to start building up now towards Phase 3 playoffs, towards Worlds, and build up some team synergy. And what a composition the Kings have drafted here. A lot of picks that tend to get banned out, mainly the Hades. But then some favorites returning. Genetics gets his Terra, Netroid on the Cupid, and then the double assassin comp out of mid and jungle. Could make life difficult for the Bolts.
Yeah, certainly could. I do expect Awesome Jake to want to make plays like this. We can get as aggressive as possible because of this Ares pick, right? I mean, it just does open up the map a fair bit.
Purple.
Is Genetics gonna hog it, or is he just...
One more, you just need...
Yeah,
one more.
he just knew. He knew that there was never going to be one more auto that comes through because he was just holding his autos perfectly, and Janex doesn't have to hog in that situation either. But Janex didn't go for the beads, though, and that's what I was going to talk about. You've got...
Could he not have auto? Am I clueless here?
Well, no, so the last auto of Ares' chain is very slow. He actually goes...
Sure.
Ugh!
Yeah, you got to wind up.
So Janex
okay.
was like, I'm going to sit here, and if you go for it, I'm going to out-confirm
Right, you're gonna
you.
out-confirm. Fair
But
enough. Okay.
I want to save it for Netroid so that he can get level 2.
That's the tech right there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not an Ares like slammer.
You don't study his
right,
auto attack, Shane.
No.
I've studied extensively.
Yeah. While I was studying the
The blade.
the blade, you were studying Ares auto attack chain. But I do think Awesome Jake got one of the smalls, but did not end up stealing away the purple buff at the beginning of the game. Let's talk about that Ares though a bit, Trelly. Desk seemed convinced that there is some value in this pick. Not only, of course, with the ultimate, burn some beads away, but lots of mobility that maybe the chains of Ares and Awesome Jake can limit.
You know, in my mind, there are two picks. There's two compositions where an Ares pick excels. And the first is when you have a lot of characters with no CC immune ultimates, which is what the Camelot Kings have here. With Cupid, Terra, and Set, you've always got great targets for that no escape. And the other is when you can consistently land chains with some setup from your team. And I don't really see that here. There's not too much like Erlong pin into chain. That is so easy, and you can hit it every single time. If you're getting value from those chains,
Right.
then you almost don't need the ultimate. But just because Awesome Jake has the sprint, it seems like he wants to try and peel for his team with the cripples as well as the ultimate. Things like this can happen where you're just absolutely poking out Netroid and you're possibly going to get a first blood here.
Oh my goodness!
And
oh my
there it
goodness!
is.
Whoa! It was just chains and autos. The AoE autos from Bera. And Jake with the chains. That's enough for first blood, and the bolts over in the duo lane. That is not a lot of damage, but pays off here. Bera does most of it. Shows you Ishtar, I suppose. Trelly can get some pressure early in the game, and look at this. Now Ven and Jake are going to combine, steal away the red buff. Already feeling the impact of this Ares.
Yeah, very difficult to try and kill an Ares, especially with that Interceptor. The extra HP 5 and the extra tick damage really does start to add up.
Oh, they've lost everything.
Asper stole the blue buff as well. The Camelot Kings crumbling as we watch. It looks like Captain Twig wants to try and steal away the blue buff from the Olympus Bolts, but I don't think that one's going to happen either.
Now Baskin and Lasber are going to have pressure from Variety and Twig here. Camelot, they don't need it, but like mentally they might need this blue buff to go to themselves, and Variety is able to steal away the blue at least. Because it was first blood, red buff, and then blue buff stolen away by the Olympus Bolts across the map. Kings needed to see that one, and Variety able to pick up the blue. So what else can you get done over here in duo? I mean, Netrioid didn't use the beads. Does fall a bit behind Barracuda. Might have to be an overextension from Netroid or Genetics to give another kill to the Bolts.
Yeah, I imagine, Genetics, very mindful player, probably knows exactly when Awesome Jake and Bear are going to hit 5, and that was right then. So
Wow,
you can
two
see,
levels.
not stepping up at all. I think even with the meditation, Genetics, if he gets within range of Awesome Jake, he dies. That ultimate combo into the chains, and then into Barracuda, who has the Jolt, and also the Swords of Light. There's just too much CC potential for this Terra to try and live through at the moment. And with meditation, you're always getting hit by every bit of that CC. So I think staying mindful of where Awesome Jake and Barra can be on this map, and probably warding up and staying back as far as possible to limit that. But the good news is Awesome Jake went sprint. There's no blink.
Right, no blink.
You're not closing gap that easily. But even this, Janex is like, do I want to step up and take this bait? Because there could be an Ares around the corner. Awesome Jake wants the wraparound, but he's not going to reveal himself yet.
Yeah, watch out though. Yeah, it's the difference. You're right. I mean, a moment like that with blink, suddenly a lot more dire for the Camelot Kings than it ended up being. So between a Cupid, a Terra, I assume Variety at some point, Big Man Tings with some lifesteal in that kit, there's a lot of healing that the Kings are going to be getting done later on in this game. But it's double ADC for the Bolts, Shadow Steel maybe for one of the two carries, and then an early Brawler's Beat Stick for Lasbra. Is that enough, though? Do you need to see some from Jake, some from Baskin, some anti-heal? Of course, what I'm talking about once team fight time rolls around.
I mean, Ares just likes building aura items as is, so
Yeah,
I wouldn't
anyway.
hate the Contagion or the Pestilence, but what I don't want to see, and this is what, Aurora picked this Ares pick as of recent, and he went Sprint Onk, I think Shell Onk, Sprint Onk, doesn't matter, did not have Blink, and it felt so useless, like level 20 late game status. If Jake's forced into the Onk, I think it would really limit what he's able to do on this Ares, but it's just so good into big man tanks and genetic specifically. I mean, once those ultimates get popped, you just say, hey, no more healing. If you do heal, we're going to kill you, that sort of thing. It works super well. It depends if Baskin can go for it, but already has the blink. You'd think might want to beads just because of the amount of CC the Camelot Kings also have, so
Right.
I'm hoping just ore items and that sort of thing, but there is a ton of value, and if Awesome Jake just wants to walk in and doesn't care about closing gap with blink, then I can see a world where he grabs a knock at level 12
Yeah,
as
we
well.
won't have the choice. We'll have to walk in if Blink doesn't end up getting picked up. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for that. Halfway there is Awesome Jake to clearing some of that up. Now, one thing you don't often see is the Camelot Kings falling close to 2,000 gold behind in the first 6 minutes of the game. It's exactly what's happened here. Think back to First Blood. That's obviously one of the differentiators here, but also setting the pace around these buffs. The Bolts have done a great job of it, but some good trading back from Twig there. We'll slow Lasbra's roll just a little bit. Didn't see like big re-invades after that one big map-wide swing from the Bolts here. Maybe let off the pressure just a little bit. But Lasbra still nursing, decent little XP lead. Wonder if this next blue buff may be under threat, but I'm not sure of how the Bolts favor that 2v2 against Variety and Twig.
Seems like Jake wants to rotate towards the red buff as well as steal away some offerings. You can see that Captain Twig and BMT are on the opposite side of the map, so maybe some aggression towards that buff. But with Bear on Oracles, the rest of the team, actually
Ooh.
Ben ulting in here.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's a double ult from Fen. Lasbra's got damage, but not enough. And Twig will wander away beneath the tier 1 tower. Fantastic wild hunt from Ven to start off that fight onto 2 priority targets. But also smart from Tings, realizing don't need to use my beads, held on to those, didn't panic, and so maintains the beads. You know, if you're talking about not having beads against an Ares, that becomes a very simple target for Jake. Had Tings use that relic.
Yeah, definitely so. I think Captain Twig was the preferred target anyways, but holding on to that jousting field, you're able to close so much distance.
Right.
And as long as that volcanic lightning autos aren't connecting, you're not too worried about a death there. So good aggression, but doesn't net too much for the Olympus Bolts. But still, pressure on the left side of the map. Genetics knows where Jake is, keeps stepping over that ward consistently. And with the Mail of Renewal and the Meditation, it doesn't seem like the Bolts really want to get aggressive on this side of the map at all. It's just going to be too difficult. The Camelot Kings were able to grab the Trebuchet, though. That's lined up over in left lane in case they ever want to send it out. Genetics loves going for those offerings whenever possible. We saw Awesome Jake try to invade him, but just was not able to stick around for that long. So I guess a small win considering the gold lead. You'll take anything you can get for the Camelot Kings in this situation.
Right, I mean, when the game stagnates, like it likely will for the next few minutes until Pyromancer comes out, it ends up being, all right, do the Bolts have opportunities to re-invade some of those buffs? Looks like all necessary buffs confirmed from the Kings, and so it's just wave control and then some of the neutral camps kind of in the middle of both of those waves. But then setting up for, yes, Pyro, yes, Gold Fury over the next couple of minutes of the game. We're thinking back, though, I think, if you kind of zoom out, where the Kings were losing some of their previous sets. I mean, it was tooth and nail against the Valkyries. Some late-game shot-calling decisions didn't quite work out for the Kings. Felt a little frantic, maybe, in some of those end-game moments. But it seems like the Kings were still able to play their confident style. I was wondering if Twig would send some damage towards Ven here. And I only bring that up to say, I don't think, Trelly, I'm worried about early to mid-game Kings just yet. The start of game number 1 here, kind of working against that thought process.
Yeah, it just seems that they're getting a bit out-farmed as well as out-aggressed. I mean, the Olympus Bolts are stepping up to just about everything they can. If there's a fight to be had, they're looking for it.
Right.
Haven't been able to land too much. It was just that first blood that Awesome Jake was able to grab on a Netroid at like level 2. Besides that, it has been a lot of, hey, we'll go for a 50-50 on the buff. If we get it, great. If not, back up. No real reason to find any sort of fight. Captain Twig, though, has not looked for a gank in the slightest. No. I mean, maybe some skirmishes in the jungle, but definitely not something he sought out. It was more so what Ven and Lasbra were able to find on the right side of the map.
Well, that's got to be a big turnaround for the Kings, because Twig has had like a game or 2 recently that have looked really, really solid for him out of the jungle. But Twig hasn't been playing like his full-on consistent self in the last handful of sets that the Kings have played. Far from a bad performance, but far from game carry type of performance. This maybe an opportunity for the Bolt as Jake has dropped his ultimate after he got ganked out, but Ven rotated over, did the same. Now you're missing two pretty big team fight ultimates. Big Man Ting's able to dash away. Variety dashed through by Baskin. Mobility not limited for the mid lane scrap. Now both teams have spent a handful of ultimates trying to find a pick.
Yeah, but take a look at this grouping. You've got double ADC, but
Shoguns.
Lasper is going back to base. I was going to say maybe a pull. I mean, just getting Big Man Ting's ultimate, Genetics ultimate, and the beads off of BMT, I thought maybe. Felt confident enough to go for a pull onto this objective, but I guess the burst certainly not in favor of the Olympus Bolts at the moment. Just, I would say neither team really has immense burst for these objectives. The shred down, of course, but a good skewer from that set could be enough. And since Awesome Jake already used that ultimate, it's going to be down for quite some time. Looks like wasn't interested in going for a pull onto the Fury. So relatively slow-paced game, but you know, like I said, BMT no beats for 2 minutes. That could mean that Awesome Jake wants to stick around that mid lane and look to combo for some sort of aggression onto the set. Could be the call. But at the moment, hovering around the Fury is the Olympus Bolts.
Well, there is a nice advantage, a 2-level lead in the jungle. Lasbra and Twig, both triple zeros. It's just been farming for Lasbra. Call it a level and a half as Twig moves to level 10. This is a heat check. Genetics passes it. The Olympus Bolts will end up dropping the Gold Fury. Just seeing if the Kings would rotate through. I mean, you got Shred on some early objectives here with the Shoguns, double Hunters. Pyromancer, obviously the easier target early in this game. But that'd be over on the right side of the map. And looking towards right, I want to look at some of the soul lane builds here. I mean, maybe typical on the Hades. We've seen some differences kind of plugged and played depending on the scenario. I won't get a chance to break it down because here is your objective speed. My goodness. Bera and Ven pick the Gold Fury back up, and the Kings nowhere to be found. And that is a quick burn by the double ADC comp, and another 1,000 or so gold for the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, I would say that's the most DPS you can get to an objective would be with 2 Hunters at this moment in time, one with XE, one with crit, and that's exactly what Ven and Bear are able to go for. Get that Fury down early on, and it looks like heading over towards the Pyromancer are the Camelot Kings. They want to try and get some gold back in their pocket, but Awesome Jake, Basket, and Ven already here. Variety's got the wraparound and Blink, and it's getting low.
It's not going to be simple for the Camelot Kings. You also don't need to throw your life away for an early Pyromancer. Variety may have just done that. Pyromancer also not confirmed is now by the Camelot Kings. Jake with a late use of his ultimate. Won't have it for this fight, but here's Lasbra over from the mid lane. Good lockdown from Genetics, but now he is the one headed to the grave. Olympus Bolts. They pick up Gold Fury +2. Only lose to Pyro.
Yeah, you got to feel pretty confident about that one. Netroid did make the full rotation over. Fields of Love to try and peel for his team, but too little, too late. I mean, losing Variety there, I tend to agree with you. It seemed like a lot, but BMT with the dive.
Hello, that's a solo, but can Ven turn the tables? Yes, he can. Needed a tower shot of 2 of help. But now the chase continues. Uncharacteristic of the Camelot Kings. Not over in the mid lane. That's characteristic of BMT. Find the one-man dive. But a couple individual pickouts here that have now raised the eyebrows a bit. Captain Twig caught out underneath the tier 1 Variety at the beginning of the previous fight. A bit too far on his own on a different page from the rest of the team. And the Bolts get a lot. They also knocked down a tower here, Trayley. Big swing here at game 1.
Yeah, it seemed to me like the Variety was saying, hey, I'm gonna either die for this while you guys get it, or I'll get out either way. I'm just gonna play zone duty as the full damage Hades. That ended up, I think he just got shredded way faster than he expected in that situation. Thought the mitigations, the protections from Pillar of Agony would have been enough, and just wasn't quite. But then, as you said, the fights after just didn't really seem like the call. Trying to defend that tier 1 over and right when Barracuda made that rotation over. I mean, you're dealing with a level 14 Ishtar. Probably not the call for level 10 at the time, King Arthur, or rather Lancelot, sticking around on that side of the map just didn't work out. Now Baskin up against 2, and he is not afraid.
Oh, Baskin might have done more damage. Now is going to take some damage. It could get worse. Big Man Ting's Genetics, both close by. Baskin has Lawbringer, and he'll head up and over. A little bit of time wasted by the Camelot Kings. Ultimately, BMT didn't miss much in mid, and actually ends up putting enough pressure on the map to knock down the tier 1 tower. So a macro game type of play. You don't get the kill, but you do get the tower. Variety's going to be able to proxy out a wave, get this next wave pushing in as well. Those are the types of plays that I feel like have been missing from the Camelot Kings, at least in game number 1 against the Bolts here. Able to pull back a little bit of gold. Just the presence of Lasbra gets the blink off the Hades.
Yeah, I was wondering if Lasbra even wanted to try and dive that. Full damage Hades could have been something scary, but wasn't actually the call. They just did decide to back off. Awesome Jake, though, level 12, not the blink. Wanted to go for the bracer. That's going to help out with some movement speed and some damage. I suppose, you know, if you can't blink in,
either, yeah.
if you can't blink in, you just run in very quickly. And that'll help you close the gap.
I guess that, what is blink if not running very, very fast?
So fast,
very,
in fact.
very, in a short amount of time, you know?
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess that was the call. Jake's like, if I sprint and brace, maybe it's even faster
Maybe
than
it's
blink.
even faster than a blink. I'm moving the speed of light. Don't think it'll work out quite that way, but should be able to get in the fight. Anyway, that's the dash off of Variety. Pillars of Agony just delaying things. Lasbra hangs out on the side. That's one dead Hades. And the Olympus Bolts, Trelly, really just 2 of them. Lasbra and Basket have now punished Variety a couple of times. Early in this game, Tyr, Blackthorn Hammer, Glad Shield, feeling all right. It's off to a 2-0 start.
Yeah, definitely so. I've been keeping my eyes on these ADCs because Barra looked like he wanted to rotate out and is going towards the right side of the map, but the Bolts, they're not looking for anything in particular. They're just seeing who's going to step up. Genetics almost took the bait, but decided to stay away. Again, hasn't dropped the bracer or the sprint,
No.
so Awesome Jake isn't trying to go for the blink just yet, or the extra blink, we'll call it for now. But you know, that Primal Fury spawned in. The Camelot Kings have sent out the left side Trebuchet. They're not too afraid here. They're trying to split up the map as much as possible, but actually Captain Twig forced into that ultimate.
Yeah, that's now a big ult off the field. Double cripple field for Camelot Kings between Lancelot's ultimate, my goodness, and Netrioid's ult. Could limit some of what Baskin, Ven, potentially Barra trying to do. Haven't quite seen it play out that way just yet. But also remember, we saw how fast earlier on in the game Ven and Barra did the Gold Fury alone.
Oh yeah.
Now an extra full item online for both of those two. Bracer, Shoguns. Camelot Kings, the big objective macro team, they're at risk of being out objectived over the next few minutes if the Olympus Bolts are able to maintain this pace.
Seems like they want to.
Yep.
I mean, they're putting that pressure over the left side of the map. Lasbra and Baskin, we're trying to push up mid waves as well. But the Camelot Kings, they're aware of how quickly this objective could go down, and that's why they're standing by. With the burst from Variety, I mean, a blink, beads, silence, devour souls is definitely enough to outconfirm pretty much anything the Olympus Bolts have, especially with the way that Variety is itemized. So trying to 50-50, definitely not the call. The Olympus Bolts want someone to step up. They want an opportunity to find that ultimate. Genetics actually went for the Divine Ruin as well as the Horrific, so no beads, no Magi, nothing to survive this Ares pull. It's not like Awesome Jake's just using the ultimate strictly for Genetics, but if it happened, you got to imagine this Terra would be burned through, I mean, pretty easily. The amount of anti-heal that the Bolts have already is a fair bit, especially with that Bracer coming through. It would definitely help. So I'm watching Genetics, watching that positioning, and more specifically watching Awesome Jake to see if he can catch out anyone with the ultimate. Has been sticking around, but no one's taken the bait just yet. And actually, the Soul Laners, they're back to their lane, so Primal Fury will stay up for now.
2-level lead for Lasbra. That's been maintained from earlier on in this game. Again, now has the kills and the assists to show for it. It's been a good game from the Pele. Likely we'll have a Primal Fury to show for it as well. The Bolts do indeed get Primal. And Jake was okay to trade out his ult for Primal there. Netrioid dropped Fields of Love as well. And that's that. And that is a 6.8K gold lead and nearly 8,000. That has snuck up on the Kings. Just around these objectives, Trelly. I mean, it's sort of the natural progression, right? It was early buff invades. It's turned into Pyros. It's turned into Furies. And just a couple of team fights on either end. This is a risky call. Down heavily, pulling the Pyro.
Yeah, Barra's still in left low, so
Oh,
a
Variety.
man up at the moment, and Variety's looking for something. Captain Twig's getting low.
Oh my goodness, Twig goes in, but immediately has to leave. He's got no health. Lasbra winning a 3v1 against Captain Twig. Pillars of Agony for Variety. Has cleaned up a kill on the back of the fight, and Variety will be skewered as well. Now it's Jake left running. The Camelot Kings down big. Are able to win this fight. And Barracuda full HP coming out of base. Looks like the Bolts didn't have one of their 2 ADCs in that last fight.
Yeah, I mean, Variety killing out Ven was absolutely massive, but now Baskin is out of a Fearless, no ultimate in sight. Paris trying to peel. I don't know if it's going to be enough.
Oh no, Baskin! Locked on the wall. What a turnaround from the Kings. A 4-for-1. And wouldn't you guess it, Trelly? Right back to the FG pit go the Camelot Kings after a big team fight win.
Barra's got Deathbringer. Variety does do a lot of damage, but so does Barra. Already the Jolt's down, though. You got to think the tanks want to get aggressive, but Barra wins these.
Barra doesn't have the last bit of damage. Delayed deicide for the Camelot Kings. And what'll take a minute should be a Fire Giant as well. Down ridiculous amounts of golden experience going into that fight, but Trelly, it simply did not matter. And a big fight win results in a now equalized game for the Camelot Kings.
Yeah, that was a huge swing in favor of the Kings. Just because, I mean, Barra was clear, hey, like, just fight if you want, guys, but it's just Pyro. I'm going to keep split pushing. So he decided to keep pushing out waves. The Bolts were like, we're up by so much, we're going to fight this. Lasper goes in, you know, was able to kill one up against Captain Twig, but Ven dying to Variety. Baskin sticking around way too long, and also Awesome Jake as an Ares. If you're in, you're probably either dying or winning the fight. In this case, dying.
Right.
And Barra's like, wait, if you all die, that means Fire's going down. So now I've got to make the late rotation in. It was not able to stop the Fire Giant from going through. So now the Camelot Kings were able to close up a bit of that gold lead. Still behind about 2K, but with Fire Giant, you have to imagine feeling a lot more confident in these team fights. The Olympus Bolts are certainly in a position where they can try and defend at these tier 2 towers.
Right.
But their relics are going to be down for such a long time. I mean, you've got a Bracer and a Blink, and that's about it until a solid 70 seconds for all relics to be up, but 40 before Lasper and Ven are feeling more confident in these fights. Staying away from the Camelot Kings, that seems to be the call. Kings on the left side, Bolts go to the right.
Variety hits decent power spikes. Now Book of the Dead for this Hades. There's earlier in the game, remember, the Bolts were picking on Variety a little bit. That extra bit of sustain, or health shielding, I suppose, at the end of these fights. Could catch the Bolts off guard. What's the call? Maybe tier 2 from both teams. Yes, back to base, spend up some gold, but looks like the Kings are going to stick around in mid. Get a bit of extra gold for themselves. So exposed left and mid Phoenix, and plenty of time on this Fire Giant. That officially brings the game to even. And while the Bolts open up a win condition for themselves on right, with plenty of time left on this FG Trelly, maybe considering poking around the Phoenix, seeing what the Bolts defense looks like.
Yeah, certainly could be the call. I got to be honest, I still think that the Olympus Bolts team fight looks insane. If you're playing around this Ishtar, I mean, usually the Hades that are up against lots of crit go the Spectral to try and survive a bit, but so far Variety has not been able to build into that, and Genetics has HP, Divine Ruin, and then the Lotus Crown, which will help, but still, these crits are going to be absolutely flying. Someone needs to get Barracuda in these fights. I mean, the only time we saw him, he was fighting 1v2 versus Variety and Genetics. BMT had to rotate in just to help out. These crits will be flying once this ADC actually gets into these fights with the rest of his team. So far, though, the Camelot Kings have the time to try and farm up. I mean, if Variety doesn't get last item, Spectral should be too far. But look where Barra is. He's still on the left side of the map. They're gone.
Oh, no. Are the Bolts going to lose another big objective because it took a while for Barracuda to get back? Maybe. Baskin with the initiation has forced a defensive runaway from the Camelot Kings. That sprint that was popped, it looked like. I think it's Netroid who's got it. Didn't finish off the Phoenix, though. Would love just one more auto attack to find its way in. But Baskin goes out of the base, chunks some damage off of Captain Twig.
It's like 2 autos.
Right, just need a little bit more damage here, Camelot Kings. But tooth and nail, the Olympus Bolts not willing to give up the Phoenix.
Yeah, they're not scared. I mean, that's a huge blink in from Baskin, getting both relics out of this Cupid. Now Netroid can't be the one that steps up with the auto attack. You'd say, okay, BMT, you do it. You're an auto attacker. You're a meleeer. You can't reach that far. It's just Variety who can go in, and now with Genetics tanking, you think enough to go in.
Whoa, big stuns out of Barracuda. Dash forward, or maybe a pull on a Netroid. The Phoenix will live. Netroid and Genetics will not. A double kill for Lasbra. And this Phoenix Siege has been repelled.
Yeah, no beads from the Cupid. Netroid was done. He tried to dash in to get some extra bit of damage, but Awesome Jake was able to connect that ultimate. The Phoenix lives on a sliver of HP, and I'm giving MVP to that fight to Baskin. I mean, he blinked in, got the relics down from Netroid immediately. Yep. That Phoenix lives on one. Variety kept walking in. Just one more auto. Thought it was going to be enough, but not going to be the case. And now the Olympus Bolts are able to actually not climb back ahead. They're still relatively even gold-wise, but you have to imagine repelling that Fire Giant feels pretty good. Keep all Phoenixes alive as well, and an Oni Fury to boot. Yeah, you're pretty okay with this trade. The Olympus Bolts are charging forward, though. They're trying to see who they can find in the meantime. No beads on to Netroid for another minute or so. If this Cupid steps up, could be in some trouble. It's going to be BMT, though, that steps up for the red buff. And I imagine full-on reset. Fire Giant spawns in 15 seconds. A sigh of relief for the Olympus Bolts. They lost nothing but their towers, and the gold is still relatively even after that.
Brings the game to a very stable point where the Camelot Kings in objectives have suddenly started to make some headway, but early on, that was all bolts all day. And remember, it was really just the one fight for the Camelot Kings that turned the game around. Whereas the bolts were in the driver's seat for the vast majority of the rest of it. Like Hero's Axe pick up here for Big Man Tings with plenty of instances of CC. Extra bit of shielding to the team, or teammate. Rarely going to be a bad thing, but build started to catch up a bit here as well. Netroid full build. Looks like Bara sold his starter to finish Exy. So one starter item down maybe to Netroid, who's really surged back into this game. Maybe not damage-wise, still looking for a bit more out of the Cupid compared to what the Ishtar's been able to do. Could be the death toll difference, though, Troy. Going into this, that's how great it is. The one starter item could be the difference.
That would be massive. We haven't seen a big insurgence of selling the death toll for dominance, silver branch, that sort of thing late game. And I guess Bear was just getting ahead of the curve. Probably realized we're in late game territory where this next Fire Giant could be the last.
Bara being here has got to be step one. Right?
Oh yeah,
for the Bolts.
I mean, he's been in left lane for the majority of these fights.
Well, Trebuchet's in left now.
Don't you
the
do it,
Bolts
Bara.
feel pressure to go back and get it, or do the Bolts say, let's just do FG now, and look how fast the Bolts are getting the Fire Giant done. Oh my goodness, the Fire Giant is being shredded, but the Bolts drop it at the last second. Big Man Tings is over in mid, and the Bolts have not committed to it.
This is rough.
Wow, that could have been free Fire Giant to the Olympus Bolts. Now Big Man Tings fully back in base. Fire Giant repicked up by the Olympus Bolts. Variety with the big Pillars of Agony has set up for Genetics. Double stun out of Barracuda and a dash in. Look at the dead proc that's kept the Hades right where he is. And the sustain is simply enough. Now the Bolts need some AoE because the Camelot Kings, they're grouped together and it's paid off. 2 kills for the Kings.
I mean, the Camelot Kings played that about as well as you can. They stalled out as much as possible. They sent the Trebuchet down left and they said, what are you going to do? We have no reason to not fight this. And then the Bolts were like, should we back? Should someone go defend? Baskin blinks in, misses the pull onto Captain Twig. And after that, the Bolts like, I don't think we want to fight this anymore. We lost our tier engage, not going to happen.
Just finally get the Phoenix.
Yep, now it's 5v3, and you got to imagine this right side bird finally goes down. They're going to be without Lasbra and Barracuda for another 20 seconds. You got to imagine, though, the Camelot Kings want to go for these Phoenixes first. It's the objective smart call, and that's usually the play they make.
Yep, right side Phoenix gone. Left side Phoenix a bit hobbled after the Trebuchet put some damage into it, but I think the Kings will take a deep breath, make their way mid. Variety has suddenly started to come alive in this game as well. The Hades did not look threatening earlier. Ultimate up from Jake, pulls in Variety. But Barracuda just now respawning, Lasbra just now respawning, meant some damage was missing. And a fantastic start to this Fire Giant for the Camelot Kings. Build up plenty of gold to go back and spend.
Yeah, I mean, Variety has been honestly living a lot longer than you'd expect. I mean, I guess it's just the lack of anti-heal. Once these Pillar of Agonies come through, the amount of CC and damage he's been doing is insane. Finish the Polynomicon as well. That's going to help out for this last Phoenix, as well as just more lifesteal for the build. I mean, so far, that's been the engage. Blink in from Variety, big damage into the ult, and then just see what happens. Captain Twig was able to pick off Barra last time, and that was really the main target I thought that was going to be able to shred through Variety's health. Now a lot of power spikes coming through for the Camelot Kings. Not quite EFG, it just ticked over 30 minutes, so they've got 2 minutes and 20 seconds left on the regular Fire Giant buff. But you got to imagine they're feeling real confident looking at breaking, I guess, fully breaking the base of the Olympus Bolts. That left bird should be going down quickly, especially if the Camelot Kings show up as 5. But the Olympus Bolts still have some answers, right? I mean, Awesome Jake has been incredibly tanky in these fights. Is essentially a walking Orabot with the Witchblade, with the Shoguns, and consistent cripples, that sort of thing. So I think grouped up underneath the Titan, the Olympus Bolts are still strong. They just really need these tanks to show up here, especially with Baskin. If he can find that blink engage that he looked for last time, I think their fight looks a lot stronger.
It's what the Bolts have struggled with so far this game. Remember early Fire Giant fight that turned the game around? Barracuda wasn't there for it. Not to say it's Barra's fault. The team just clearly on a different page. Left side Phoenix, or right side Phoenix defense earlier ended up going well for the Bolts, but lost 99% of its HP. Took a second for the team to really get grouped up. But now it's a blink in from Variety. Good lord, that's nearly a one-shot onto Lasbra from Variety. Does lose the Pillars of Agony, but has that bought enough space for the Camelot Kings to whittle down the left side Phoenix.
Yeah, Variety just said, Paulie, Devour Souls, I'm going to get you 2 ticks of my ult, and you better use something. Lasbra didn't want to beads, didn't want to ult, was forced into that ultimate. And this left side Phoenix is still the target here for the Camelot Kings. It's going down slowly, but the Olympus Bolts are not giving this up just yet.
Fire Minions are on the Titan. A couple waves of it. Wild Hunt onto Variety and a Captain Twig. Little stun on the back side. Little damage onto the Titan. Not enough to really worry the Bolts. Well, starting to build up a bit now. Call it about a 5th of its health bar. And when you have a Titan dive almost imminent, you do need every sliver of HP to give yourself time. Lasbra halfway back to his ult. Ven does not have his. And they might not need the ults, the Camelot Kings. Into the back line goes Twig, but he's traded out 1 for 1. Big skewer from Big Man Tings. And the Camelot Kings have come back into game 1. They will mop the floor with the Bolts and take a 1-0 set lead.
I mean, that is just a massive comeback there. The gold lead wasn't too atrocious for the Camelot Kings to make that call, but just 1-1 fight with Bear over in left lane, the full wipe. They get that Fire Giant. They get enough tier 2 towers to comfortably fight into the next Fire Giant, and then after that, it just seemed like the Kings overly confident, and it paid off for him. BMT goes like 5-1. He was just consistently diving on that set. I saw a lot of questions and no answers from the Bolts.
I mean, the Cupid damage might have built up later on in that game, but Netroid was there spamming some heals, getting some stuns out. Same with Twig. Finally, at the end of the game, we see this big Lancelot dive, but early on, wasn't really doing much. Both teams equally happy with 2 different halves of the game. The Bolts thrilled with the way that they started off this game. The Kings thrilled with the way it ended. Unfortunately for the Bolts, it's the ending that matters. Camelot Kings turn things around, take game number 1. I got a feeling more fireworks around the corner. Bolts Kings continues right after this.
Well, in a single team fight turnaround, the Camelot Kings are able to bounce themselves back up and move themselves into taking game number 1. If you want to support the Camelot Kings, the Olympus Bolts, or any of our teams here in the SMITE Pro League, then go over to shop.hi-rezstudios.com/SPL and pick up a jersey brought to us by our good friends over at Skulls. If you want to support your favorite team, or if you just want to pick up a jersey because they look cool, then go ahead to the website and grab one of those now. Thank you so much to Skulls providing the jerseys, not just for our players here in the studio, but for the fans over there at home as well. Remember, shop.hi-rezstudios.com/SPL to pick up your SMITE Pro League jersey today. And Mifflin, game number 1, it started off so well for the Olympus Bolts. They build themselves up a 5, nearly 6,000 gold lead. And then one team fight, the Camelot Kings get a wipe on the Bolts. They take a Fire Giant, and from that point on, it's all Camelot Kings all day.
Yeah, I mean, the execution from the Olympus Bolts until that team fight around Fire Giant was perfect. Every single time Genetics wanted to dash into a monolith, he caught a chain to the chest, or the Twig would dive into the back line and need to finish off some of these kills, wouldn't be allowed to dash. The Ares really was getting a whole lot of value. Baskin was creating infinite space. Lazarus having himself a good time finding priority targets in the back line. And then the Fire Giant fight happens. And I think it's broken down in initiator diff. Your front line on the Olympus Bolts missed literally everything. Jake shot out a chain, missed it. Instantly channels ult in what felt like panic, hit only Variety. Variety says, okay, well, I guess if I'm going to get pulled, I might as well do something first. He leaps in, channels Pillars of Agony on 2 hyper carries, doesn't get pulled. And meanwhile, Baskin blinked forward to try and separate Twig from the fight and whiffs his Fearless. So when the entirety of your initiation just doesn't do anything, a 7k gold lead doesn't seem so bad. The Camelot Kings take the team fight and the objective afterward. But it wasn't all easy sailing from there. The Camelot Kings gave the Bolts one more opportunity on that right side Phoenix, so that initial siege just looked real bad from the Kings. Variety walks in as if he had Poly to finish off the bird, didn't. Netroid's like, well, if Variety can't do it, I've gotta, just dies. And the Bolts surge back forward. But afterwards, it was trepidatious play from the Bolts, where it felt like maybe that last Fire Giant team fight left a stain on their mental. They weren't willing to play with confidence. And the Camelot Kings have only got confidence when the timer at the top of their screens, anything past 30, it feels like they just get a buff as a squad, and the Kings went out from there.
And I mean, even kind of going back towards that Phoenix siege that took such a long time for the Kings too, because it wasn't like they walked up, they got pushed back and said, okay, we're done here. The Kings stuck around for quite a long time, so long that Baskin was able to blink in, to a couple of relics away, specifically from Netroid, and really slow the things down for just a little bit longer. But now we move into game number 2, picks and bans between these two squads out there. And maybe not so many change-ups necessary. At least the Camelot Kings did fall behind very early on to the Olympus Bolts, who were able to get, as I said, 5,000-6,000 gold up to kind of start the game. But once it came down to the late game team fights, that's where the Bolts started to fall apart, maybe play with a lack of the confidence that they had comparatively to what they had in maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I think if the Kings were to make any adaptations, I would probably look towards Twig in the jungle. The Lancelot game, although better than the previous performance on Lancelot, still left a little bit to be desired throughout the early portions of the match. Lancelot very good at that level 6 to level 10 spot. Didn't see a whole lot of play there. Did make up for it though, Captain Twig that is, in the very last team fights of the game. It was actually his initiation that may have cost him his life, but it really opened the door for the Kings to continually just W key at the Olympus Bolts. Maybe get him back on something that he's been a bit more standard on. He ate a whole lot of bans in game 1, so no surprise he had to dig a little bit deeper in the God pool, but Hunbots was still available and I think would certainly fit the style of play the Kings have been electing for. As of now, the Kings have got a decision ahead of them. Do you want to draft a mid laner here? There's a whole lot of valuable mid laners available. We've seen a lot of priority towards Guardians in the last couple of sets as well. Things like Kabrakan come to mind. They've got options. But at the end of the day, I think there's so much available as of now that the Kings can kind of just select whatever they feel like and not worry about whether or not the Olympus Bolts are going to get the best response.
I was going to say, well, just run back the Triple Hunter that was picked up last time around. It seems that might just be the call. Cupid for the Kings, same as game 1. Cernanos for the Bolts, and
Run it
assuming
back.
that the Zishtar goes right back there.
Blades
The
of
exact
light,
same top 3
smite my foes.
from both of these teams, so go ahead, run it back there. But I think you're right to maybe talk about maybe bringing something a little bit earlier for Captain Twig. He's already now 3 assassins deep into the God pool, kind of the top of the meta, and top of his picks have been removed away. But at least for now, the Kings feel this Hades was a pretty big win con for them. Variety had a great performance on this God. Seems the Kings are going to go right back to it since it's been left open.
And I see no reason not to. I mean, the Hades in those late game team fights was just different. Early game, I think Variety took a little while to adjust the playstyle. The full damage Hades was still positioning as if he were playing just like the standard Mulan style play, just full tank walking down. But as he started to adapt to his slightly more squishy nature, he found his opportunities a bit more consistently. And now, having an entire game's worth of data on it, I trust that Variety will be able to pilot that one from minute 0 to minute done. So good selections. Camelot Kings, same draft. Run back the previous death segment, man. Maybe the Bolts just go for the same here too.
Well, same pick for Jake, maybe a little bit earlier in the draft this time around. Last time it was a 10th pick. It was Pele in this spot for them. So as far as the bans go, it was Fenrir, Erlong Shen in game number 1 for the Bolts. It's Xing Chen and Artio for the Camelot Kings to try and focus out the support a little bit while the Bolts are focusing down the jungle. So Pele's still open, at least for now, assuming it doesn't get banned away, for the Olympus Bolts to go right back to if they want to just reprise their draft from game number 1. Camelot Kings would need Set and Lancelot, but we won't get the full run back as Captain Twig's Lancelot eats a ban here in the second phase.
Yeah, I'd expected to see Bolts banning out Twig's God Pool. That made sense to me. Surprised that it is the Lancelot, though. Maybe feeling a bit more pressured by it than I was giving him credit for in the previous game. Could still toss another ban towards the Hun bots, and that really would push Twig to the depths of his God Pool. Things like Ratatasker still available, and certainly one that is within the realm of possibility for Twig. Would bring you a little bit of global presence, some ranged initiation, decent mid to early game as well. So opportunity is still there for the Kings jungler. Whereas on the other side, the Kings need to start dealing with that front line. I think Artio a good start. Maybe go ahead and address the tier as well.
One more ban for the Bolts. Again, last time Erlong Shen Fenrir were targeted over towards Captain Twig, this time with that Lancelot being banned away. Still hits his God Pool, but not to the same degree that it did with the other ones there. Plenty of picks still available for Captain Twig. Pele notably still up as well if the Olympus Bolts do want to go back to that one after the bans are done, unless they ban it away here. They will not, and it will be Fenrir once again.
Really?
Taken away from Captain Twig. And that just kind of feels like maybe a bit of a head scratcher to kind of go into it. I mean, a couple of tools on the Bolts really feel like Fenrir's not that great of an option. So maybe surprising to see that the Fenrir is the one eating the ban so consistently.
Yeah, I just have to assume with the amount of presence we've seen from Fenrir and P's and B's recently that he's been dominating the scrims in the SPL just over the last couple of weeks. Maybe in a no beads Aegis world, you get a little bit more pressure earlier on, but for the most part, Fenrir's the, hey, give me your beads, God, and the beads are still getting purchased, so I'm not so certain that too much has changed otherwise. Erlong Shen for the Olympus Bolts, a bit of early game aggression when you've got 2 high pressure lanes already between mid and duo. Having an Erlong means that you can just have consistent lanes you can start rotating towards to leverage some of that pressure. I think pretty strong. Also helps you out around some of these neutral objectives. I like to equate Erlong essentially to a third hunter, just auto attacks really, really well, so makes short work of Gold and Pyromancer. I think the Kings in this position really do need to look at some sort of AoE CC, some sort of consistent initiation. And we said it last game, I'll say it again, man. Twig's real good at Hun bots. Would look pretty good here, I think.
If I'm not mistaken, that's also one of Captain Twig's most played gods of all time throughout his career in the SPL, which has been for quite a long duration. In fact, it is 73 times he has gotten that pick with a 63% career win rate on that god. So would be an option for him. Ratatasker currently being hovered for the Kings. And still need what is likely a mid laner for the Kings as well. Medusa, the lock-in for big man Tinks. How do you kind of feel about the Medusa Cernanos matchup in the mid lane?
It is not one that I am well versed in. I don't get too many opportunities to see it. I think that it's probably like a 5-5 matchup. I don't imagine one's got overly a good matchup into the other. Bramble Blast getting some buffs recently means that the cripple will stop the lacerate into like Viper Shot combo for the most part. It will allow you to hide in the wave a bit more consistently, but maxing Acid Spray and the Acid Spray having the anti-heal on it means that in the 1v1 you will likely see a little bit less value from lifesteal from CERN. Otherwise, strong ultimate from Medusa with Petrify, follow up on the dunk from Ratatasker or the initiation from Terra. Exact same could be said of CERN on the other side. You see a pull from Ares, you're probably going to turn him into a pig, right? Or even a taunt from Erlong Shen, turn whoever's taunted into a pig. So I would say 5-5 matchup between the two, but CERN's just a little bit better in the late game.
Now this Ratatosker for Captain Twig, something he's seen some decent success on the past, is a career nearly 66% win rate on the times that he has been able to pick up this god. And for the Camelot Kings, I mean, the Hades is going to take a little bit of time to get online. The Terra is going to take a little bit to kind of get to that point. Is this a draft the Camelot Kings to slay themselves to once again push to that 25-30 minute mark to be able to stand up against the Olympus Bolts?
Medusa's got a lot of early game presence, so you could certainly play there. Ratatasker can get involved early. Cupid's got pretty strong presence in the early game as well. It is a draft that is going to be good in the late simply by nature of being Double Hunter, but the other side has got the exact same value of Double Hunter. I would say that you probably do slightly favor the Olympus Bolts for the first 10 or so minutes just because of the Erlong Shen on map, just Mannequin Scepter, so strong, the ability to apply that passive so easily as well, going to be valuable for the Bolts, but I wouldn't say that one of these two compositions is just like really heavily favored. If anything, I would say the Olympus Bolts in the latest portions of the game have got an easier to execute strategy in the team fight, but as far as relative power of the god selections, I don't know, I think this one's pretty even.
It does feel like the Olympus Bolts have quite a few tools to burn beats away. You've got Ares ult is a very easy one to either grab the CC immune ults of the Camelot Kings, maybe the beads, and then whatever is still maybe left over, Xing Chen or the Erlong Shen can potentially grab that one out there. So a lot of beads pressure by the Olympus Bolts, a lot of just pressure in general by the Camelot Kings early on. Can the Kings keep the ball rolling and take themselves a 2-0, or the Olympus Bolts going to take us to Game 3 to find out? We got to jump into Game 2 with Dulcin and Trelly.
That's right, a little draft adaptation from both of these two teams, but also in-game adaptation needed from the Olympus Bolts in game number 2, because the core of the two compositions feels very similar. A few bits and pieces change here or there. And also a meeting of the minds over in the mid lane. I was hoping Kings might step one toe too far over the line and we get a full brawl within the first minute of the game. But no, Dulcin, Trelly, and Doug will watch both teams scatter back to their own side of the jungle. And Trelly, the Bolts are going to stick with their core carries here. Ven on the CERN, Bara on Ishtar. Netroid gets the Cupid back. It's a Medusa this time around for Big Man Ting. So double Hunter here in game 2.
Quad Hunter, which is going to be interesting.
Right.
I imagine a lot of, itemization changes, like Genetics is already going for the horrific emblem. That's going to help out, especially in the team fight when quite literally all of the damage dealers on the side of the Olympus Bolts are auto attackers. I think that's going to help out a ton.
Still sprint for Jake.
Yeah, Jake is going to be able to sprint in, but also sprint the horrific. It's not going to help.
Are you feeling lack of Ankh was egregious by Jake in game 1?
I mean, if you watched BMT dive at that Titan Siege, it was just any little bit of HP he took was then full healed just because of that Kingslayer ultimate. So I think it would have helped, but I'm not Awesome Jake clearly, so he's got a plan, and we just haven't seen it yet. Maybe it's a 2-game plan. First game number 1 makes you think the bracer sprint's coming, and then in game number 2, then he whips out the blink.
Well, look, I mean, you're still fighting against Genetics on Terra, Netroid on Cupid. Variety had a little bit of sustain on the Hades. A lot of that's going to be there still. And so going sprint early. Bracer, Ankh, Blink. All options for Awesome Jake at level 12. That's a bit down the road, though. Junglers also switch up their picks here, Trelly. Lasbra on the Erlong Shen gets mannequins. Add that with double ADC. Have to imagine early objective shred continues to be a possibility here for the Bolts.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that Lasbra has the ability to get active for sure. As the game goes on, though, not the easiest composition to play Erlong Shen into. I mean, especially without the beads early on going near Netroid, Genetics is going to be trouble. You can easily get behind BMT, though, and that could be the option, trying to fight through this mid lane and trying to cancel out that dash. Very easy to do, especially if you have 9 turns, Blessing, Blink, all those different tools to try and, make sure that BMT is always, like, aware of your positioning. So
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see some pressure towards the mid lane, or even try and deal with Variety early on, because Variety had a fantastic game #1 on this Hades. Didn't go so great in the early, but as he got late game, so much damage in the initiation, he was just playing out of his mind.
Nice little health trade there from Netrioid. Poke damage, stun, all into Barracuda, who will sustain back up just fine. On the other side of the jungle, you also have to imagine, really around level 5 is when Captain Twig has those opportunities open up. Because it was a very, very quiet early game. Not only Twig, but the rest of the Kings. Remember, so many buff invades against them. They were losing a lot of their buffs. They lost First Blood. The Kings did. You draft something like the Ratatoskr, Trelly, is that telling you that Twig wants to get more active at level 5? Or is it just a different look at a team fight later in the game?
I think it's a bit of both, right? I think has the ability to get
Sort of a
active, but
Lancelot, right?
yeah, any time that Lasbra's nearby, you're probably not looking to fight into that situation, not this early on. But the team fight, as you were saying, you still have some great die potential with that ultimate. And it looks like Captain Twig wants to consistently be that initiator for his team. And I think that's always been his playstyle, right? He's going to go in, set up, maybe die trying, but at the very least, the Camelot Kings team fight is going to look better for it. I think Rat suits that playstyle quite well. And J-Mac told us the win rate, right? 66%. Stats don't lie. He's able to do that pretty consistently here for his team.
How much can we glean from that? Okay, so we know then, therefore, that Twig has got plenty of SPL practice on this pick.
Right.
How long has Ratatoskr been around, though? Like, was there ever a meta where he'd be playing it and, like, everyone had a 70% win rate? You know, like, was there a time where Rat was just so broken that, like, padded everyone's win rate? You know what I mean?
I'm trying to think if Release Rat was...
Do you see what I'm getting at,
Yeah,
though?
no, I get exactly what you're saying. If Release Rat was ever allowed in comp, before he, you know, the actual nerfs and reverts came to the Acorns, maybe Twig could have padded his stats, but it was so long ago
That's a
I don't even
delicate
remember.
balance, though. You know, I glean from that Twig has played this pick for years and years and years at the highest level. I think I would get more out of it if Twig had, like, an overwhelming loss rate.
Like 15%.
Right, like he's played 60 games and won 2 of them. Like, that's terrible. We'll see, though, if you can get the winning started here. Good Petrify from Big Man Tings. As a 2 versus 3 really breaks out over in the mid lane, and it's Captain Twig left low. Lasbra, Ven, they both dropped their ultimates, so do Twigs and Tings is what I was going to say. Twig and Tings drop their ult. Now right over to the blue buff. Remember, this was an early game win condition for the Olympus Bolts in game #1. Looks like they're going to have to drop it this time with Genetics lurking behind.
Yeah, definitely not an easy one to try and outburst Variety. With Genetics here, you'd think Baskin is just going to use that ultimate to try and steal away the buff, and he will, but now he's without an ultimate, but still going in is Baskin, 1v3.
Variety's low, but Variety has ult still, and Lasbra, you can tell, has got to think twice about where he wants to go. Double leap out from Baskin, double dash in from Genetics, and Variety could have had a triple dash if Twig had it. And that's First Blood to the Camelot Kings. Overextension from Baskin.
Yeah, and you could tell Lasbra wanted nothing to do with that. I mean, he was like, yeah,
sure?
he's like,
Sure?
I'm standing here, like, can we just go? Like, your blue buff's up, and that's fine. And then Baskin's like, no, I've got ult. It's like, okay, well, Genetics is here now. Are you sure you want to keep doing this? Like, I'm going crazy. He just sent the ultimate, stole the buff, yes, but died in the process. I guess that was the win that Baskin was after. Doesn't quite have the teleport available, so he's going to have to foot it all the way back to base, but should be able to pick up his own blue buff, and he does, so that's fine. He's going to have that MP5, as well as just now Variety's got to respect him a bit more, I suppose, and that's really what Baskin was after. Didn't finish the Book of Thought, though, so Variety's going to get that one stacking much earlier on. That's going to make clearing the lane also much more annoying here for this Hades.
You're relying, if you're the Olympus Bolts, on 2 Guardians to be dealing all of your magical damage this game. Baskin looks like, what's it been? It's been Book of Thoth and then like Breastplate of Valor to start off the Xing Chen build.
Yep.
Jake will get some through the passive and get a bit stronger on the Ares anyway. But Genetics says big threats early here. Ven, Bara, Lasbra picks up Lotus Crown, first item. And so not only healing might not get mitigated, Trelly, That's a nice little boost early in the game for the Camelot Kings, wherever that healing gets spread.
Yeah, no doubt. Whenever Genetics is in the fight, you gotta make sure your anti-heal is there, or you're saying we're waiting out this ultimate.
Right.
It's very difficult to burn through, especially with the Lotus Crown finished up here for Genetics as well. But Awesome Jake has not been one to shy away from the aggression. Lasbro also on the way over, maybe waiting to see what Jake can do. Has the ultimate.
Netroid uses beads. Genetics is going to get pulled back in twice, but my goodness, that stun! Oh, the turnaround from the Camelot Kings! Suddenly a 3 versus 3 because Twig has dunked on the duo side of the map, but Ven on a rotation out of mid might stall out the aggression, but Tings here as well. Petrify counters out Wild Hunt, slows Jake, and gives a second kill of the game to the Kings.
I mean, we just see exactly why you're not giving Genetics Terra and expecting to get kills with that ultimate up. I mean, so much healing. The rotation in from Captain Twig was massive as well, but I mean, the Bolts were very confident, right? They saw the rotation, like, wait, Jake's got a big ult here, Lazarus here, we have so much damage. Turns out your damage doesn't matter, especially if it's getting all sustained through like that, so great turnaround. I mean, not even a turnaround, more so just confidence there from the Camelot Kings, knowing where Captain Twig was and how much sustain they had. Puts them about ahead 1,000 gold this early on in the game. And now pressure to the left side of the map certainly also belongs to the Camelot Kings.
Man, and it's not been the start that Lasbro wants on this Erlong Shen, where Twig is off to a 2-assist start, facilitated both kills. Lasbro's had to watch his soul laner die once and has been relegated to farming ever since then. I feel like it's under threat. You know, it's still very early in the game, only 8 or 9 minutes in. But games where Erlong Shen does absolutely nothing early on and that carries on into the mid game, you can be farmed up, but like, feels like there's this intangible pace that gets set where it's just so hard for Erlong to catch back up, if not off to a great start.
Oh yeah.
Clearly that's just in my brain, but might be a difficult team comp for Lasbro to fight back into anyway.
I mean, I agree with you. I think from the lock, like from when we were watching Pick and Bans, getting ready to cast this game, I was like, Erlong Shen here?
Right.
I mean, what is the call? What pick did the Olympus Bolts think Erlong Shen is good into? Looking at the Camelot Kings draft, I think just the Medusa, and it's still not great because just built-in anti-heal for your ultimate, that sort of thing. It tells me that the Olympus Bolts wanted to get active in the early, but Camelot Kings have been
They've been on it.
They've been ready to stop everything that the Bolts have been looking for so far. And the gold is not so out of reach that this game is just over by any means. But you're right, that Lasbro is going to have to climb up a steep hill to try and catch up to what Captain Twig has been able to do. The regank situation that Captain Twig has sort of went for. Let Lasbro get active. I'll ult over if you need me. If not, I'm going to be farming. That's been the consistent start. Now that Pyromancer spawns in about 15 seconds, maybe the Olympus Bolt's able to climb back. They could burn that. They could burn through that relic, or that objective rather, very quickly, especially if Ven and Lasbro are there.
Twig is going to start hitting some of those power spikes here soon as well. Fully upgrades the Acorn. Get into some of those mace items after the fact, where Lasbro goes Mannequin's Crusher early. It's what you expect. Haven't seen much out of it just yet. My initial glance thought that the golden hand chart was player damage. I was like, there's no way Netroid has an assist and did 47 damage. Oh no, but Lasbro has barely done any damage. I think he might have had more golden hand
Then damage done.
than he had player damage done at the moment. So shy of 700 for Laz at 10.5 minutes. And in the duo lane for the Bolts, not much better. It's been jungle to left has just not been it for the Bolts to start this game. Now Barracuda's been sitting back and farming up. He's level 11 to the 10 of Netroid, so Barra's been farm-minded, maybe more so than fight-minded off the rip. Jake has been caught out once or twice, but I think the more damning evidence here is the 700 less than damage for Lasbro to start things off. So you need to get that a bit more active over the next couple minutes, especially Trelly. Now that Gold Fury, now that Pyromancer's on the table, he's going to be forced into a fight. So I'm not sure you just let this go quietly.
Definitely not. Captain Twig and Genetics playing zone duty, but Awesome Jake is leading the charge. The Fury's going down quickly, but Lasbro wants to go for Wrapper. The Bolts are picking this back up.
See what Lasbro can get done. Gold Fury picked up by the Bolts. It's a coin flip, and it's a Fields of Love. Down, Bolts get the Gold Fury, but how about the Petrify from Big Man Tings once again? Pull in from Jake means a kill for Baskin. But does Twig want to chase? Yes, he does. 3-man knockup. but no follow-up from the rest of the Kings. Baskin, the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, sends Netrioid on the back line of this fight. Is that a stun? It sure is. In fact, it's 2. And Captain Twig helps out Netrioid once again, but Variety, all on his own, gives 1 back to the Bolts. 2 for 1, but Gold Fury to the Bolts. Bolts not feeling too bad about it.
Yeah, no, I think the Bolts are certainly happy with that one. If Variety didn't die, I think the Camelot Kings would have been also relatively happy. Just a weird fight throughout. I mean, Lasper had a good wraparound. Captain Twig with a 3-man dive, but just not quite able to catch up in that situation. And then Variety, I guess, thought he was going massive in the back line, but just died before he could really do anything in that situation. You don't quite have the Warlock stacked up. You're not as tanky as you think you are. And now the time for the Bolts to make a pull on the Pyromancer. Genetics doesn't have great steal opportunity, and BMT's not quick by.
This is where the player damage numbers don't tell the whole story. Lasbra and Barracuda, fantastic objective shred here at 13 minutes. Get the Pyro for the Olympus Bolts and officially pull ahead in gold. And so that's an area that was missing, you know, was, all right, where do we get these early objectives? You're gonna pick Erlang Shen. Sure, you get early pressure and early damage on actual players, on actual lanes, but should be happening around objectives as well. And now a couple over to the Olympus Bolts. And Toxic played second for Lasbra. And so in game 1, Trello, we were wondering where's the anti-heal? Where's it gonna be coming from? Didn't see an onk from Jake. Lasbra, you say, oh, well, you're not playing Pele. You're not going to buy Brawlers probably on this Erlang Shen. Goes into Toxic Blade for a little extra anti-heal. Now maybe can send some towards Twig, who does have through the Cosmos. And assistance from Variety. But no, it's just the ult force from the Rat.
Yeah, it seemed like Twig didn't want to use it, but forced them as far up as possible. Just to push away and maybe create space for this tier 1 tower to go down, saying, hey, chase me as far as you want, but I'm going to draw you away from my team in the process. Netrioid, unfortunately, is also feeling that pressure over in left lane. At the very least, tower will still stand tall. 3-2, still a gold lead in favor for the Camelot Kings, but you have to imagine the Olympus Bolts feeling more confident in the fight situation, just by the way of things have been going. This tier 1 tower will go down, and Netrioid is going to lose that in the process. But Genetics and Twig, maybe looking to find Awesome Jake out.
No through the Cosmos, no stun from the wall, no stun from the Acorns either, all of it missing. Awesome Jake low, gets the beads off of Royd and Twig. Maybe a worthwhile trade there for the Bolts, knock down tier 1 tower, get a couple sets of beads away. Bolts not giving up here in game number 2, despite what was a really nice start for the Kings. Some objectives have really brought the Bolts back.
Maybe I'm underestimating how much damage Barra and Ven do, but I feel like in that situation, just let Jake pull you in. He was probably 2 autos from death, especially if Twig also got pulled, but I guess you had the Wild Hunt, you still have the swords. Barra and Ven probably had enough damage to say, yeah, you can trade for our support, but we're going to kill you in the process. So I think just playing safe, the Camelot Kings are confident in their late game. Don't have to make any risky plays like that. Are just going to lose the beads and be fine with it.
Now, Trelly, you know, Relic update game 2 won't be, I assume won't be a bracer for Jake, because Ven has picked up the bracer for himself this game. Looks like foregoing the shell, and Netrioid does go back to the sprint. So 2 different carries picking up 2 different pieces of utility in their Relic choices.
Yeah, I'm not gonna write it off until I see Awesome Jake go back and pick up something that's not the bracer, because I think still could find value in, even though Ven's got it, but because Ven has it, you can play through it very well. Just group up and say, all right, Ven's gonna drop it this time, and then I'll use the frenzy, that sort of thing. There are plenty of options here for Awesome Jake to try and get value. And maybe the call was, you know, Ven, you pick it up and let me get on, because clearly we need it. I think the healing is becoming more and more apparent here to the Olympus Bolts if they want a 5v5 team fight when Genetics is around, especially once Variety shows up as well. They could get some great value out of it, but because Pyromancer's down, Oni Fury spawns in here in about 20 seconds. I want to see these solo laners either rotate towards the left side of the map or just posture that way, because Baskin's got access to the teleport. It's not up for 2 minutes actually, but you know, Variety's got the blink and the beat, so he's gonna have to foot it the whole way over if he wants to try and make an impact towards that Oni Fury. At the moment though, both solos are over and right, so it doesn't look like any rush towards that Fury once it spawns in.
Well, Variety's hit a big pivot point now in this game. Think about how hard game 1 was for Variety at the beginning. Lost his blue buff a couple of times, was getting dove. 0-1-1, much easier start for Variety. Well underway in that build. We'll get the Warlock staff stacked here shortly. Bancroft's Talon completed as well. And so Variety in a really, really good spot as far as damage goes. And we saw later in the game, you know, Variety was jumping on Lasbra and just essentially one-shotting that Pele. Plenty of magical damage to come out of the solo lane. That's not where we're fighting. We're maybe fighting over here on the left side of the map, where Oni Fury is picked up by the Camelot Kings. Bracer down on the ground. That's genetics this time. Just some poking and prodding, though. Netroid's going to get the passive nice and stacked up. Just enough presence from the Bolts, though, to force the Kings back.
Yeah, but now the Bolts are going to pick this up and
They did
drop
last
it.
time.
Seems like Variety, yeah, made the rotation over and is trying to zone / set up for anything. Any relics down, any damage going towards the way of the Olympus Bolts will be worth it. But now with Genetics playing zone duty, I think the Camelot Kings do want to try and pull this once again. Awesome Jake doesn't have a second relic. Is just sitting by. Has the spray, but has not been able to go back to base.
Nope.
Just a trade back and forth here. Neither team really wants to commit first. Still has to be in favor of Variety, but with those ADC ultimates, Ben and Barracuda could definitely make a difference here in this fight.
Jake slams the shield, steps forward a bit. Big commitment. Variety in. Is the threat of Pillars of Agony enough? Bolts say no. Send some damage back towards Variety. Baskin's got the root on a Twig, my goodness! Twig doesn't get the chance to fight. The chains will pull in Genetics as well. And it looks like the Olympus Bolts have found their opening. Good taunts in from Laz. That takes some beads off of the Camelot Kings. And the Bolts will have to settle with 2, but a hard-fought 2 for the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, but they're not ready to give up this Fury just yet. It's burning quick, and Variety dashes in!
Variety goes in with the Pillars of Agony, does not steal away the Fury, and seals his own fate. Might have baited in Netrioid as well. It's just the carries left alive. Medusa and Cupid slithering away from the Fury pit. And now, largest lead of the game for the Olympus Bolts builds up. With an Oni Fury in the back pocket.
Yeah, the blink in from Baskin was all the Olympus Bolts needed for that
They're going to
initiation.
FG.
Great ultimate from Awesome Jake, and yeah, feeling confident. Ben drops the Bracer, and immediately the Fire Giant's going to be started up. BMT, no ultimate, but has spotted this out. It's going to have to be the acid spray of time and try and steal this one away.
Deals some damage. Uh-oh, through the Cosmos! No! Olympus Bolts will secure the FG and a kill on the Captain Twig. He rolled the dice. Comes up just a bit short. Now the Olympus Bolts are going to extend their lead out. It's interesting how these objective fights have gone, Trelly. You look at both the Oni Fury fights, picked up by the Kings, dropped, picked back up by the Bolts. Then the Bolts able to win the fight.
Yep, and now it's time for the Bolts to continue pushing. They've got those Oni minions right side of the map. It's Variety up against 4. And that tower should be dropping here quickly. I don't imagine there's going to be any defense, but I also don't think, unless the Olympus Bolts are really feeling it, they're going to push into that Phoenix, and they're not. Full-on retreat here. They still have 3 towers to go through. Probably a smart call to turn their attention towards mid, the tier 1, and then that tier 2 over and left as well. But it's been so long. I mean, Awesome Jake has not backed since level 12. He's now level 15, still holding on to 3,500 gold in hand. So I don't imagine the Bolts want to force a fight anytime soon. Back up, get an upgraded starter item, finally get a second relic for
And
Awesome
it
Jake.
is upgraded starter, drum roll,
The Frenzy.
the Frenzy.
He said, well, "You get
Okay.
Bracer, I'll get Frenzy. We're both gonna
All
be,
right.
we're gonna be chunking."
How offended are you that that's not an Ankh?
Now that they're winning, I would not be surprised if 10 minutes ago Jake said, "Oh, cool, Ven, you're hitting level 12. Get Bracer so I don't have to, so I can get Ankh."
Right.
And then the Bolts just won out, and they're like, "Okay, never mind. Screw Ankh. I want to go Frenzy. I'm gonna get Emp Armor. I'm gonna get Frenzy. We're underneath these Phoenixes. We want to end this game quick." And so I'm not too mad about it anymore. If the Bolts had lost a fight, or Fire Giant isn't in their hands, maybe a little bit differently. But now, I mean, you're just trying to snowball through the rest of this game, get as much gold as possible, and make your double ADCs as strong as possible. So the Frenzy, the Bracer, the Shoguns, all of that underneath the Phoenix, I think probably a smart look here for Awesome Jake.
Yep.
You're looking for structures more so than kills at this point in the game. So 3 more towers to go through, and the Olympus Bolts are grouping up towards mid.
Looks like Double spectral for Baskin and Lasbro as well. And so there's a little bit of crit for both Big Man Tings and Netrioid. That'll shrug off a bit of that damage. Frontline feels near unkillable maybe right now for the Olympus Bolts. Though the last couple fights were close. Camelot Kings unable to close it out. Remember, a couple of those kills are also like an attempted dash in and a steal, things like that. And so it's really another example of pretty handy team fight and kind of an objective confirmed by the Bolts that has flipped things around here. Now remember, a couple teams in the league really watching this set with great interest. The Valhalla Valkyries, they're shot at reaching top 6 right now. It's the Bolts and the Titans that are sort of within striking distance in the last 4 sets of their phase. So the Valks really hoping that the Kings were able to turn this around. Now on the other side, the Oni Warriors, they'd like to keep the Kings at bay a little bit longer. Same with the other 2 top teams in the league between the Leviathans and the Dragons. So rooting interests definitely split as far as different teams in the league go. Right now, seems like the teams that are rooting for the Bolts, though, happy with the way that Game 2 has gone. Barring a big turnaround here from the Kings, might be happy with the way that it ends. I'm not sure if the Kings' defense is good enough to overcome a 5,000 gold deficit. We'll find out. And it's Awesome Jake starting it off, gets 1 pull. It's on to Genetics, who hasn't been able to do anything. Lasbra melts him down, but uh-oh! Big Man Tings has turned the damage on a Basket as well. Both teams missing a frontliner. As Sprint gets used, in go the Camelot Kings. Double pin from Lasbra, double stun from Bera, and damage to spare from Ven, and the Olympus Bolts knock the left side Phoenix down.
Yeah, Fire Giant had 15 seconds when that siege started, so the Camelot Kings wanted to try and wait it out if possible. But the Olympus Bolts, off the back of some great plays there from Barracuda, as well as chains from Awesome Jake, were able to grab that Phoenix and finish off Netroid. Looks like Gold Fury spawns up here soon, so the Olympus Bolts can grab that before they reset entirely for the next Fire Giant that'll be touching down in about 30 seconds. So left Phoenix down. Variety does not have teleport, so the Camelot Kings have to commit their bodies to trying to defend this Phoenix, which is so far away from the Fire Giant that they would love to try and defend. But you got to imagine Olympus Bowl is pretty confident in their fight, not only in the jungle, but underneath the Phoenix as well. I think just leagues ahead, build-wise. I mean, Awesome Jake is unkillable, whereas Genetics dies to 1 ultimate from the Ares. Same sort of situation. 3-0. Van has had a fantastic performance. Both of these ADCs going undying currently, but Lasbra's been more so just set up. I haven't seen that damage climb much since the game started. It's been taunts and pins. Not too much all in, but hey, Hidden Blade, that's going to help out. It's going to help out your poke if you're just pinning.
That's right.
But the wave is pushed up over and left, so the Camelot Kings have to try and force a fight right now, or else someone's going to have to back up to defend that wave.
Yeah, the time fleeting for the Camelot Kings. But they're a decisive team. In the past, they've won games in moments like this, where they say, guys, we've kind of got to know now. The decision almost made for you. You're saying, look, we've got one last chance at this. Let's coin flip and see how things go. If the ultimate shot call is to defend this Fire Giant. Other decision is to let this one go. You're valuing your team's defense and your AoE capabilities around your Titan. Third option, look for a steal. That's what Genetics and Variety are going to try to do. They won't be able to do it, though. And it's Fire Giants on all 5 of the Bolts. And a kill onto Variety. Another one onto Genetics. And it was a half decision, not fully made. Camelot Kings now looking down the barrel of a Game 3.
Yeah, it looked like a full-on engage. That's what the Camelot Kings were after. I mean, Variety goes behind the Fire Giant, wanted to dash under and go for the steal, but Lasbra immediately goes behind and says, no, 9 turns blessing, you're getting CC chain dead. Captain Twig doesn't go into the ultimate, so clearly the fight wasn't on the play, but Genetics also went in that situation. Great ult by Awesome Jake to wrap him back, and now right side Phoenix is the call.
How indicative of the pacing of this game have the damage charts been? Think about, we were talking about Lasbra having like 700 earlier on, has now officially jumped over Twig, who was quieted down the back half of this game. This defense has got to be a miracle. The backline has been found, but not soon enough. The Olympus Bolts send us on to another Game 3 this weekend.
I mean, you got to highlight the ADC play because they looked good. Ven and Bera had a fantastic performance, but Awesome Jake and Baskin, consistent engage as well as lockdown. It seemed very difficult. I mean, the tanks of the Camelot Kings, Genetics, and Variety, seemed extremely dealt with this game. I mean, they
Yeah.
were trying. You were trying. I mean, it was a bit of healing at that one purple buff fight where I was like, oh man, Genetics is popping off. After that, it just seemed like this Terra could not be that engaged, and you got to give credit to Awesome Jake. Those cripples, those chains, consistently hitting on a Terra.
Yeah, I mean, total differences in what we saw from support play between game 1 and game 2.
Oh yeah.
Big value from the Ares here in game number 2. Terra melted through pretty consistently. The jungle dynamic was a lot of fun to follow in that game as well. Not big damage numbers from either, but sort of the pacing and the setup as the game went on looked a lot different. And it's the Bolts fans left happy after game number 2. The thrilling conclusion of Bolts versus Kings coming up in just a sec.
second set of the day is going to be going the full distance as the Olympus Bolts are able to bring this one back and take game 2 for themselves and give themselves another opportunity to try and break into potentially the top 4 by finding a win out here. And it started off so well for the Camelot Kings. They're able to find a couple of picks early on. Big Man Ting's able to get active on this Medusa. But once we start getting around some of this objective play, Mifflin, once we start getting to kind of these mid and late game team fights, it felt like it was a lot of indecisiveness out of the Camelot Kings and the Olympus Bolts kind of rallying around their front line just a little bit more to be able to get those beads and be able to find those picks.
I mean, obviously the Bolts deserve every bit of credit. They played that game very well, being able to force errors from the Camelot Kings. But I think you are right to say that it was indecision from the Kings as well as just a departure from their standard risk-adverse play style. When I think of the Camelot Kings, I think of clean smite. If it's not a 95% odds play, the Kings of the past didn't attempt it. But here it was a whole lot of desperation in play on field, attempted Gold Fury steals, like in this situation where Variety goes in and just risks it all, realizing, look, I'm just going to lose my life immediately afterward. Strange plays across the board for the Camelot Kings, but maybe more so it's frontline diff in some of these late game team fights. I really liked what we had seen from Awesome Jake, some really good max range chains, some great pull-ins. Lazra had a couple 2 or 3 man taunts that really separated these engagements. And Baskin, more often than not, did have to operate as sacrificial lamb, but it's a pretty decent one to have when you're Jing Shen and you're sacrificing yourself to toss 2 or 3 people at the rest of your squad. So the Olympus Bolts, I think, just come out ahead in decisiveness, in just timing around these objectives, and they really did clean up some of those sieges as opposed to what we had seen in game 1.
And I think a little bit of that indecisiveness really kind of shined at that fire giant right there where Variety and Genetics both kind of walked up and said, okay, we're going to try and go in there, either steal this one or slow them down, and they jumped in and they said, oh, okay, well, maybe we can't do that, but we're still going to make the commit anyways and just dive in at the very end of it and then get pulled back in by the Ares. At least Genetics did. He goes down. Variety dies on the back end of that fight because he runs into Lasper and the rest of the team there. So Camelot Kings fall down in game number 2. The Olympus Bolts, who at least in game number 1, again, they start out game number 1 really strong, had one really bad team fight that kind of opened up the doors for the Camelot Kings and then jump in for game 1, take that one for themselves. The Olympus Bolts able to rally back and kind of hold firm game number 2 for themselves. But now it's going to come down to this game 3, but this is a familiar territory for the Olympus Bolts. I mean, the last few sets that they've been having, especially sets against the Warriors, have been going this full distance. And this is a team of players who have been around the scene and going to these full distance style of games. These game 5s, these game 4s in best of 5 scenarios, these full game 3s in this set. We'll see if the Olympus Bolts can hold out and take game number 3 and put themselves to tie up the Camelot Kings in the standings at a 5-5, or the Kings going to bring it back in game number 3, keep themselves firmly in that top 4 spot. All comes down to starting out for the picks and bans for game number 3 as the Olympus Bolts will be the team that takes first pick this time around. The Camelot Kings have elected to take that second pick for themselves, which inverse of what we saw in the previous games, where no matter what kind of got banned throughout, the top 3 of game 1 and 2 was Cupid for the Kings, Cerna's Ishtar for the Olympus Bolts.
So we'll see if there will be adaptations insofar as the first selections. I'm not so certain that Cupid has been warranting his first pick as of late. Just feels like that god is getting slightly overvalued. Maybe a byproduct of the meta shifts with the Beats Aegis ruling. Maybe just a byproduct of larger meta shifts at hand. But just in this set in particular, I feel like maybe you'd find a bit more value elsewhere in your first pick slot. We'll see whether or not the Bolts are going to echo the King's sentiment that Cupid is just all that, as they are for the first time in this set, getting first pick for themselves. Maybe some slight differences in the ban department, but Cupid available, goes unpicked. The Bolts say Ishtar seems to be the new flavor of the week.
Yeah, give that one over to either. I was wondering what reaction Barracuda was having there, because it gets Ishtar gets locked in. He just has a moment of joy there, but it's Ishtar and Cupid. No Cernanos. That one does get banned away along with Dodgy Yamoja by the Camelot Kings. A bit of a shift, at least for the Bolts. The Horus ate a ban, so Genetic's not going to be able to go to one of his signature picks that he's gone to multiple times in the past whenever it does get to these Game 3 scenarios. So I'm curious where the Kings will then kind of put their pressure towards. I mean, Hades is still available if they want to go for that one for Variety one more time.
No Hades for me, all right? Look, Hades real good, but Variety's Hades, barring the last 5 minutes of Game 1, just hasn't been able to find its footing. Not a standard initiator, not exactly tanky enough for Variety to be that like pseudo support style soul laner. Hades with the build that is meta right now is hyper carry, and when I think of Variety, I think of real tanky guy that separates a team fight. Hades capable of it, but it's a lot different in execution as like compared to like I don't know a full tank Bologna just walking into the back line. So let's get Variety back on one of his standards.
Well, whether this Lancelot goes to Captain Twig in the jungle or Variety in the solo lane will be determined as the picks continue to go through, as it's Cupid Lancelot top 2 for the Camelot Kings. Now with the Cernanos gone, that does leave this Ishtar open to interpretation for the Olympus Bolts, because both Venenu and Barracuda have been running that pick consistently. When it was the double hunter, the Ishtar was going over to Barra. When it was just a single hunter, we've been seeing this Ishtar go more often over towards Venenu. Soul kind of comes to mind for the Bolts if you want to run maybe a magical hunter in that slot. But when the Soul has been run, it hasn't been as a traditional hunter, has it, Mifflin? It's been more of this very high burst style of mage pick.
Yeah, and I'm always expecting it to be like nimble talent or whatever it's called, the attack speed upgrade. But it hasn't. The glyph of choice has always been Bancroft's Claw, it feels like. So standard mage, the name of the game, if it is going to be Soul for the Olympus Bolts, and I think that's a pretty good call out by you. A likely selection for the Olympus Bolts here. Whether or not they're going to go towards it in their top 3, to be determined. I don't believe that they will do like a Soul Nox lane. Not exactly something that I would like to see. Really does struggle like holding their own in that 2v2. Lots of pressure can come from that Cupid. But if they don't pick up Soul in this top 3, is kind of likely that the Kings will ban it out themselves. This was a pick that I wanted to talk about, though, and I was hoping we'd get an opportunity. I didn't expect it to get selected this early on, but Susano does a whole lot in the current meta and with current circumstances. Has a whole lot of damage, can get involved around levels 5 and 6, massive AoE, CC, massive nuke, and when you've got a star player like Lazra putting him on a pick like Susano in current circumstances just seems like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, Lazaro definitely would like to get active early on a pick like the Susano. It has been one that he's gone to not very often in the past, only 14 games throughout his career that he has moved onto this pick, but wins a little bit more often than not. So we'll see how he performs on it with the Nox Ishtar combo so far for the Bolts. Still up in the air where this Ishtar is going to land as the pick now goes back over to the Camelot Kings. And Vulcan to the mid lane for Big Man Ting's been eating a couple of bans, but has been largely absent this set specifically.
So the Vulcan versus Susano matchup is very interesting in that Vulcan's going to be hovering in the absolute farthest shadows of his backline, creeping in the darkness, right? Hoping that nobody looks at him. But Susano's entire job is going to be hunting down this mid laner come 25, 30 minutes into the game. But the interaction is, whichever one of the two, Vulcan or Susano, hits the other first, that's the one who's going to win. Meatball into backfire and an auto attack and you're done. Susano lands the 3 into a 2, into whatever his combo needs to be, ultimate or no ultimate, you're probably going to win that fight immediately afterward too. So lots of volatile interactions and late game team fights between these two. But this is surprising. I thought the Kings would be vying and jockeying as hard as they could to get an RDO lock-in for Variety. It's in his God pool, standard frontliner, phenomenal matchup into the top 3 of the Olympus Bolts, but instead, they ban it out. I thought the Bolts may have banned RDO, but it's the Kings taking it away.
RDO, Xing Chen, banned away by the Kings. Meanwhile, Tyr and Mulan. That Mulan has been a pick that Variety has gone to a few times in the past, maybe 3 of his previous recent games have been there. You were calling to move away from the Hades, but it seems the Kings are going to stick with it. One more time for Variety back in the solo lanes. This Lancelot slotted over towards the jungle now for Captain Twig, very likely, and leaving Genetics as a final pick. Is there anything immediately in your mind besides the RDO, since it's been banned, that kind of screams to maybe go over towards Genetics or the Kings?
Yeah, I mean, I'm racking my brain for what Genetics could be looking for here to really weigh in on his pick. I suppose that supports are just less contested than soul laners, and the Kings would have rather had a Hades for themselves as opposed to the Bolts taking it, assuming that the Bolts would have taken it, and I think that is a fair assumption, and you don't want to have to deal with Pillars of Agony plus Typhoon, so maybe this is just a pick for the Kings that is more so just an additional ban. I mean, Genetics in this position, where would I go? Certainly not Sylvanas, right? I mean, the lockdown from the Olympus Bolts and an immobile god like that get hit by Shadow Lock and you're just stuck there forever. Maybe Khepri? Khepri could be pretty decent with the telegraphed initiation. If you know Susano's going to be hunting your Vulcan in these fights, you could just keep the Vulcan alive a little bit more consistently. But it's Cabrakan instead. The Kings bringing some aggression in their early game.
Cabrakan maybe to at least try to deal with the Nox if he has that first ability pop. Won't be locked down in that regard maybe. Hades though for variety, so very magic heavy on a lot of the damage for the Kings with Vulcan, Hades, and Cabrakan. Meanwhile, it's Amaterasu and Soul as the pickup for the Bolt. So with that, Soul likely slanted towards Barracuda, has been going that full mage build. And Amaterasu for Baskin to pick that he's become very comfortable with over in that Soul lane. The Hades lane is going to go pretty heavily for Hades in the early game, but as far as the laning phase is concerned, unless Baskin egregiously steps too far forward one too many times, should be fine over in that regard. So now we're looking at the Susano versus kind of Lancelot jungle matchup and kind of where to put that early pressure out. Is this a game and a composition for Captain Twig where he needs to get involved a little bit earlier on to kind of get the Kings rolling? Or can the Kings kind of rest and allow Captain Twig to build up some of that farm and move towards the late game?
Yeah, I mean, Lancelot's in an interesting position right now because as far as the SPL concerned, Twig seems to be the only guy locking him in consistently, maybe a stray Lancelot here or there. When he had first jumped into the meta, Lancelot, I had thought, wow, this god's early game damage is just crazy. He's got 100 to 0 the second he ticks over to level 5. Generally, that leads you to a place where you want to say, Lancelot, get involved early. But Twig doesn't really do that. That's not exactly his style. He likes to get involved closer to that level 10 to 12 to 13 mark. So, I don't know. Hard to say. Would I like to see Lancelot get involved? Yes, because that's my personal bias, and I'll say that. When I play Lancelot, I like to see him active in the early game, especially when you've got that displacement from the shield bash against picks like Soul or Ishtar. If you get behind the Ishtar, there's really nothing she can do in response. But with the Camelot Kings and this style of draft, I think they are completely reliant on big man Tings. This is a big man Tings draft. Let's get Pillars of Agony, not because Hades has a great ultimate, because it locks people in for the Earthshaker, or Cabrakan Wall for the Earthshaker. This feels like a whole lot of facilitation, where Twig is just going to act as a bridge into the late game.
A lot of lockdown, a lot of control for the Olympus Bolts. The Amaterasu, the Nox, a lot of single target, maybe more than anything else for them. The Swords have been doing really well in these team fights from this Ishtar to lock down multiple targets as well by pulling those back in and finding those stuns. Can big man Tings do big man things on the Vulcan and bring the Camelot Kings to a victory? We'll have to find out in game number 3 as we throw it over to Dulcin and Trelli one final time.
Got some wordplay on the desk going into game number 3 here.
He's spitting.
That's right. The Camelot Kings and the Bolts will go one more. And one more time we will see is it the early game that wins out, or is it the late game turnaround that wins out? Because Trelli, in back-to-back games now, we've had the team that pulls an early lead, dropping it at some point, and the opposing squad able to win the day by the end of it. Game 2 felt like the Kings really had it. Not the case, though. What caught your eye there?
Big Man Tig's just dancing in the mid lane. He knew the rest of the Bolts were going to walk up as they have been doing as 5, so he sat there dancing, waiting for him. He knew they were coming. So.
Yeah, why not? Well, he gets to play Vulcan, which is one of his favorite picks. The big Earthshaker, plus damage and grouped up targets is like BMT's whole deal. And the desk was talking about it, Trelli. Should be some facilitation for that. Pillars of Agony to pull him in, Earthshaker on top of it. Fields of Love to lock him down, Earthshaker on top of it. Cabrakan walls and stuns, Earthshaker on top of it. Putting a lot of cards in the BMT deck here in game number 3.
Yeah, certainly are. You can see Genetics is walking up, tried to go for a steal, was not able to grab it, but did get the hog out from Awesome Jake. The Mannequin Scepter is going to start to add up here onto Genetics. And Genetics does not have Shell. It's just the Blink. One more auto will do it. Yeah, that's it. Mannequin.
Oh, no!
I mean, yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking, but
It's devastating.
Genetics just surprised Pikachu. He was like, what? I blinked into the Invader's Curse and got hit by 12 autos? What? I died?
And Barra has Mannequin? No way.
Barra did 1,000 damage to me and I died?
830, Trelli. Thank you very much.
I literally said to Awesome Jake when I was out there, I said, these cringe supports that keep running at purple buff, I hope you all die at purple buff. And Jake said, sorry, man, it's the meta. Jake didn't do it though.
Could
Genetics
the bolts get another? No.
What?
Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes. No. They don't. Twig gets out. Nearly was another for the bolts, but Twig limps away. The aggression, my goodness. Bolts at level 2, Trelly. They're setting the pace across the map.
Yeah, I mean, with Mana Conceptor Soul with the heat up, you should be trading autos as much as possible. And Genetics is only level 1 at the moment. Got the blink as well, no sort of safety relic. Does not care. Just is not too worried. But Captain Twig took a lot of damage and actually went back for the Chalice. So 300 gold essentially in the hole for the time being. Up until Asbra spends money on potions, you're going to be, itemization-wise, you're going to be down for a bit as well. I mean, the Desk touched on it. Captain Twig does not like to fight early. He wants to sit back into level 10, level 12. I mean, I bet he'd sit back to level 20 if he was allowed to. But Lasbra, he's not going to spend 300 gold on a Chalice. He wants to get that either Crusher, Brawlers, Jotuns, whatever the first item may be, online ASAP, and then try to find a fight wherever possible. For me, I'm going to duo lane because Bear is chunking.
Yeah, you need some help over on left if you're the Kings. A little extra support if you're the Bolts to really push this lead. Awesome Jake with the mask start. See, I haven't seen Nox support in a little while. Genetics just going to completely ignore the lane. Yeah, I was wondering how the Bolts would answer. They aren't going to pull the King's purple because Twig is over on this side of the map. Admire the idea from Genetics just to force a decision out of the Olympus Bolts. I want to talk about Nox support though, Trelly, because for a while mage supports were all the rage. Saw a bunch of E-set, saw some Nox, quieted down for a little while. Right around the time the mask got changed to a starter item. So it's been far from the meta picks. But Jake, if I were to see it played, would probably be the support playing it.
Yeah, definitely, and I think has a decent matchup here. I mean, the Kabrakan was picked up last, which is the only pick that doesn't hate the Nox, right? If you're as long as you're able to hold on to that first ability, you're just completely immune to the combo. But I imagine Awesome Jake not looking for Genetics most of the time, usually getting the value out of that ultimate, you know, delaying the damage and just, you know, reducing it as much as possible for the team fight is the way that Awesome Jake likes to play this pick. Essentially, just throw that ult off on cooldown.
Right.
And we see that sort of play style from him. So I think the pick just works really well with what the Olympus Bolts like to do. And Awesome Jake won that. Even when it's not a meta, he's going to be going to it just because he's able to consistently hit those combos, and that's what you want. Awesome Jake does get the Gauntlet of Thebes online already, and that's just off of good pressure from the duo lane. I mean, both level 5, you look over Genetics, sits at level 3, Netroid doesn't know what his ultimate does either. He's still level 4 for the time being, so no more fighting in that duo lane for quite some time.
Yeah, Genetics still suffering a bit from that early death. Likely maintains around a 1 level deficit. So Lasper hits level 5. Go back and finish up one of those first items for himself. Typhoon, you know, early, some good setup. So it's Jotuns. On the flip side, Twig in a similar build path. But again, you know, Twig, it's more tendency-based. You know, not that Lancelot can't get active early, but Twig would love to start to build up a couple more items. I suppose Susano, though, Trelly, maybe in a similar camp, you know, 2-3 items really chunks down that back line. Also, we're in Game 3. We have to take that into account as well. And in a very important one, as far as this set goes for both of these two teams, usually see the pacing slow down anyway.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that Lasper has the ability to try and find a kill onto, you know, maybe Captain Twig in the jungle or BMT, if variety dashes, that sort of thing, but it's hard to force it, you know. It's hard to force these ganks with only one item, so I think probably a smart call by Lasper to just, you know, have the blink ready, sort of hover around the right side of the map, hover around mid just in case there's an opportunity, but focus on your farm more than anything because BMT takes over to level 7. You know, that's probably a good place to look, that Vulcan. We've been highlighting it a bit already. Has the ability to absolutely chunk with the proper setup, and I think the Camelot Kings have plenty of it. Like a good wall from Genetics onto a few of these targets that can't really go through walls. That just gives you the perfect setup there for an Earthshaker. You can max range it. They're going to be locked in for such a long time. I'm just waiting to see the team fight presence of the Camelot Kings because they have no need to fight in the early, right? They have made it clear that they want to sit back underneath that tower for as long as possible.
Now, it's small, but you're hoping that by the time you fight in, the Bolts haven't continually pulled ahead. This could be a good look, though. Big man Tings uses the beads. There's simply too much. Too much damage, too much lockdown, though the lockdown didn't quite matter. But now Twig, who's used the beads, needed to avoid the pull-in. Maybe thought he had a shout for a kill onto Ven, but no, just the one, and it's Awesome Jake snagging one onto BMT.
Yeah, he definitely, Captain Twig would have been able to find some more damage onto Ven, but just got bounced around a bit. Didn't want to use the beads, ended up having to, and then at that point decided to give up that kill, which is probably the right call. Genetics wants to wall in Awesome Jake here, but Captain Twig has given up the chase already, so I don't think any more aggression is going to happen towards the support. Whereas Genetics is just bouncing around at the moment. I was going to say maybe trying to invade some of these oracles. I mean, the oracles are here as well as trying to get a trebuchet for yourself, but this Kabrakan, not quite tanky enough. And the Mail of Renewal is here, has the blink available, but without the rest of the team, I don't think you're setting up.
No.
You know, without BMT close by or Captain Twig, and both were a little bit far away, so probably the smart call, just to retreat.
BMT's used his ult once or twice to clear out Greater Scorpion, clear out some farm. Obviously knowing not much fighting is going to be happening around where he is at the beginning of this game. So we get our third look at variety on Hades here in Game 3. Then the desk raised another really good point, and it's that, you know, the end of Game 1 looked great because the rest of the Kings did as well. And now variety, an opportunity to start off Game 3 a little bit better. Not enough damage from Twig. Oh no, and Baskin lives. That one gets away, and variety had ult up and everything as well. Maybe miscommunication there, but either way, it's a dropped kill onto Baskin.
Yeah, that was a good play by Lasbra as well. Actually pulled Genetics away, had the blink, wanted to go for the wraparound, realized that Baskin was low underneath that tower, but Lasbra pulled him away and said, hey, there's someone coming, look out for it. Now we get to see the bounce back and forth here from the Olympus Bolts, but Netroid and Captain Twig are onto it immediately, and they're not going to let that one go through. Variety sets up another gank onto Lasbra, but he wants to fight this too.
Baskin rotating back in. That's the dash off the Hades. Also a red buff invade from the Kings happening over on the left side of the map. Kings should be favored here. They're 3 versus 2. And they do indeed drop the red, but nobody will head on over and pick it up. Those are the small wins that the Kings need to find a bit more consistently as they stabilized the gold bleed and kept this game right where it stands, despite a really nice start for the Olympus Bolts. You know what I was just thinking? When Hades spreads out the blade and kind of detonates, that big like rumbly bass sound. If we talk about gods that sound really cool at Worlds over the big bass speakers in the crowd, Hades has got to be doing that to us like a million times a game. Just the big bass like damage spread.
Yeah, I want it in 4D. I want the goop, you know, from like the tier 5 skin to also like spray out whenever, you know, like the minions all die.
I don't know if I don't think we have rights to that.
To
I mean,
like the roof?
we've worked with Nickelodeon in the past with like crossovers and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
They might have the market cornered on
slime. Yeah, that makes sense actually.
Gooping people.
Yeah. That makes sense. Maybe just a mist then, a water.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the games are gonna be so hot. We need a nice calming mist like halfway through to really chill everyone out.
Assuming the meta is similar to what it is now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because I guess we only have another couple small updates towards the end of Season 9. Could see some shifts in that, I suppose.
I mean, Gilgamesh is getting buffed. Every time he hits a drop kick, your share just shakes, you know? Like we could implement a lot of great stuff. It could be like a 4D
The back
ride.
of your chair punches out at you like you just got drop kicked in the back or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. This is great fan experience we're pitching here.
I think that would really enhance the experience. But
Suddenly a bunch of folks have put their tickets up for sale. Just uninterested in being drop kicked by Gilgamesh at Worlds. Anyway, that's my fault on that tangent. And I'll bring us back here. As the game has started to trickle back towards variety, we'll get a chance to hear some more of that bass. Maybe here in just a moment. Double knock up and double
Beautiful.
wall. It's because all of it's onto Jake with a dazzling offensive for repositioning. Wonderful from Baskin in the cripple field on the Pillars of Agony. Chef's kiss from the Camelot Kings, and a 1-2 punch pays off with a Pyromancer after the fact.
Yeah, Baskin even had the juke shoes there with the dazzling offensive, but was not able to get his knocks out of trouble. Lasbra
Whoa, Lasbra!
Gonna steal away that Pyromancer though with a swift blink and Typhoon, and that's gonna help put the gold back in favor of the Olympus Bolts. Was never that far out. Instead, the Olympus Bolts were still
Erases
ahead.
the 2 kills.
Yeah, but does help and erase that little bit of gold that the Camelot Kings were able to get. But I think, you know, gold aside, The Kings needed something just to get going, and now heading over to the Fury. That's going to be something they definitely want. Only Ven is close by for the time being, but this is going so fast.
Ven should be able to get just in range. It's got to be immediate, though.
Nope.
Almost there. But the Kings get the Gold Fury, and that tilts things back to the Kings. If you look at the last couple of minutes, a couple of kills, plus Gold Fury, now equalizes this game at 11 and a half minutes. And so while we haven't seen the kills very active in this set from the Kings in the first 10 to 15 minutes, also finally now back to that early objective play style that, you know, the Bolts have seemingly forced the Kings' hand in the last couple games. The Bolts have been the first ones to some of these objectives. Now it's the Kings checking the answer of the Bolts. This time around, the Gold Fury a bit too slow, and right on time are the Camelot Kings.
Unfortunately for, I guess, both teams in this regard, both of the neutral objectives are off the map now, so no reason to fight unless something, an
No,
overwhelming
it's fine for them.
opportunity.
It's unfortunate for us.
Unfortunate for us, no more action to be had.
Right.
But Variety is trying to
Wow,
find it at
two
the very
levels.
least. Yeah, dashing under tower consistently, putting some pressure on the basket, and here comes Genetics over the left side of the map. So some possibilities for brawls, but really nothing to fight over.
Yeah, but Kings maybe more so than the Bolts that are relatively risk averse, you know. The Kings probably the least likely of the two to just scrap over nothing. Now could be over something like a buff, could be over some neutral farm, but even that at times for the Kings doesn't feel worthwhile enough, especially when you've just clawed your way back into the game after what was an early deficit. I don't know if you're throwing it away over a scrap around one of these buffs just that easily. So the Bolts may be the team that could poke and prod. But also they've got some scaling to do here as well, Trelly. Barracuda on the Soul, just like any other hunter, needs to build up later on into the game, but looks like more Magi style build, unless it's Nimble Bancrofts. Maybe the Bolts on the left side of the map at least just fine to throw up the hands, kick back, and let Barracuda farm.
Yeah, I imagine Barra's going to go the build that he has been going since he started playing this Soul as of recent. It looks like Netroid is going to juke out everything from Awesome Jake. Does Genetics want to go in off of this? Charged up the one, but looks like no. Not looking for Awesome Jake, not looking for the knocks, more so just clearing waves. I'm assuming that the Soul Reaver, Op Shard, Bancroft's Claw, full burst, Soul build that takes an hour to get online, but Captain Twig can get chased down here by Lasbro.
Oh, he is. Lasbro takes the teleport in. Looks like a solo. There's a little help from Ven in there as well. And Laz on the Susano starts to heat things up a little bit, just as Barra has done on the dome of Netrioid. Chunked away half of his HP. Needs a little help with Genetics here, who is not taking any damage from Barra. Purple buff is up. Rotation in from Laz, who does not have Typhoon. And this is now a really nice swing for the Olympus Bolts. In a game where when the objectives are down, you've got to look at the minutia of what's going on. It's a kill for Laz. It's an invaded purple for the rest of the Bolts. Those are the types of things in the downtime that ultimately make the difference and set the stage. As well as maybe a kill onto Netroid. His dash is down, beads used by Lasbra, and another setup kill for the Olympus Bolts. And they're funneling it in, Trelly, to a great late game carry in the Susano.
They definitely are. I don't even hate that play from Netroid, dashing in as opposed to out. Realize Lasbra's behind him, so might as well just ult the wave, get as much farm as possible. And you didn't lose a relic, so that's pretty much the best thing you could do in that situation. Netroid just too little, too late underneath that tower, but the Camelot Kings able to steal away Ven's red buff in the process, just trying to get as much farm as they can in the time being. Pyromancer's not going to be up for a bit, and that Fury also down for another minute or so, but still kills have been happening. I mean, off the back of aggression from Lasbra, is able to find two very quickly, holding on to the split stream, trying to teleport well after Captain Twig rode the horse away. Then also is rotating over to Netroid as well. So finding 2 kills before those objectives comes up is massive. Now the Olympus Bolts have a little bit of gold in hand, about 500 ahead of the Camelot Kings. You got to imagine that second relic that Jake has as well will help out over Genetics.
You would think. Is that enough, though, to tilt the scales back? Because right now it looks like any fight on the right side of the map, where Variety is immediately there, 2-level lead over Baskin, plenty of damage, some penetration early on in the build as well. This Hades could be an absolute menace, Trelly. Maybe therefore favoring the Kings around this Pyro.
Yeah, it's going to be scary because there's a lot of beads down at the moment, I guess mostly on Lasbra. So, you know, if you're looking at the Pyromancer immediately, I'm definitely giving credit over the Camelot Kings just because Variety's got everything up, has the Bancroft's Claws, got the Blink and the Beads, Pillar of Agony's ready. And I have to imagine the Camelot Kings want to make a pull on this immediately.
Yeah.
Genetics is here, but he's not going for the damage. Finally, the pull comes through, and Ven, he's going to be late to the party, but he's on the way.
The Fury will be up in the meantime, but the Bolts uninterested in splitting. The Bolts considering a fight over the Pyro. Just dropped by the Camelot Kings. Remember, objective secure, you'd think should be where the Earthshaker is, and it happens just like that. Kings secure the Pyro as Variety has found the backline, but so is Lasbro. The dive just better from the Bolts because they're the ones who have finished off a kill.
Wow.
Variety killed himself. So the Bolts lose the Pyro, but win the fight. And could be more handy now, a double pull in from Lasbro, but has to dash away. Captain Twig hoping for something, but it's just taking damage. Ven is on his own. Ven's got to get damage. Venenu, he's got it. It's a 4-kill swing for the Olympus Bolts in a miraculous team fight.
I mean, it was a good engage by the Camelot Kings. It was max range Earthshaker into the blink in from Variety. Said, catch them for me with the Pillar of Agony. And they got the objective. They got big damage on Nabera. But after you use both ultimates just for some decent damage on Nabera and the objective, the fight after seems to be real good for the Olympus Bolts. They're charging towards this Fire Giant, and Baskin and Awesome Jake have already started it up. It's just BMT and Etroid, and take a look at where they are, the left side of your map. They are not stepping up for this Fire Giant. It's going to be an 18-minute Fire Giant here for the Olympus Bulls off the back of a great fight at the Pyromancer. You lose the objective, but you get the much more important one. And I would be surprised if they give up Primal Fury as well. Looks like they're more so focused on the right side of the map. The Camelot Kings will be able to get some extra gold in hand, but still, what a great fight for the Olympus Bolts towards that Pyromancer. I mean, just if you're not killing off of that ultimate, then Variety and BMT essentially just wasted it.
Right.
And the fight after didn't look too much better.
I mean, if you're the Bolts, got a little extra time to push this down. I also like to look at Jake's build. It's the Emperor's Armor gauge, you know, like
Yep.
once Emperor's Armor gets slotted in, that's when you know this Bolts team's feeling themselves a bit in the pacing of the game. Sometimes it's second item if the game is going really, really well. Sometimes a bit later on. Smack dab in the middle, makes sense. Smack dab in the middle of the game, the Bolts have now pulled a big lead. Jake loves this itemization, and it's helped the Bolts on a couple of instances. Now, the Kings a team that fight and scrap for every win, every loss. They're not going to make this simple on the Bolts, but you have to zoom out. This could be the third straight loss for the Kings, who have looked near unbeatable at points this year, especially getting towards the end of the phase and playoffs. It's been a tough look, so some good in this set, but now in Game 3, Trelly just outpaced by the Bolts over the last 5 or so minutes.
That is the case for now. They do have some decent fight back. Variety still level 18, so has the ability to get active in these team fights with that Pillar of Agony. Last time, you know, blinked in, got a big ult off, but was then shredded through because no one else was diving. You got to imagine if Variety's going to do that, Captain Twig, Genetics, they have to be there as well. The only reason you're going Blink Kabrakan is if you want to be the first one in these fights with the rest of your team. Staying back and peeling means you're getting 0 value out of that relic. But now it's time to sit back underneath the Phoenixes for the time being. And the Camelot Kings currently on the right side of the map trying to grab a tier 2, but they need to go back immediately. They're going to lose their left Phoenix for free. Olympus Bolt's 4 strong currently, and Lazarus pushing up mid. They drop Ven's Bracer,
Yep.
and they're ready to go.
Haven't seen the big Earthshaker setup combo yet. Maybe now with the Bolts funneled underneath this Phoenix. Could see some AoE really pay off. Only above the supports is Big Man Tings and his damage. With tier 2 Obshard, Soul Reaver, some Flat Pen, Book of Thoth. Got to imagine that's going to climb up here. Twig blinks forward and loses most of his health. Variety gets knocked up by Lasbro. Frenzy now used. Left side Phoenix burnt down. And Lasbro will take the ultimate away from Captain Twig just by threat alone.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by the engage. I mean, it was a blink in from Twig and then nothing. Variety, you could tell, also wanted to go in, but once the ultimates came through, I think Lasbro actually put Variety into combat so the blink couldn't come through, and then after that, the dive's just done. I mean, if it's not Hades and Lancelot at the same time underneath Phoenix, you're probably not going in. So Twig loses everything, the blink, the beads, and the ult. Variety at least hangs on to his ultimate and relic, but you're losing that left side Phoenix. That's probably best case scenario for the Camelot Kings, right? You would love that Phoenix stayed up, but that fight could have went bad to worse with the lead that the Olympus Bolts have built for themselves. So only losing one Phoenix and no casualties means that they're able to group up and try and defend at least mid-Phoenix if it comes through. Fire Giant for another 30 seconds. The Olympus Bolts, I don't think they're looking to step into Phoenix range anymore. Just take the one bird and get out. Remember, this is an 18-minute Phoenix. I mean, Fire Giant, rather.
And Phoenix.
Yeah, and 18-minute Phoenix. It's just a real early to be going for that kind of play, and Fire Giant falls off in 15 seconds. Just get set up for the next one.
Does make the most sense. Dire straits for the Camelot Kings. I mean, decision-making felt a bit better early on in Game 3 here as far as fighting around the objectives, but it was really the first rotation that looked clean. The Bolts routed the Camelot Kings in the last fight. Has looked disjointed. Twig and Netrioid will hide themselves just for a moment. Trying, I suppose, Trelly, just to clear out as many of the left side fire waves as they can, get this wave pushing as far back as possible, and buying themselves a little bit of time before the next FG spawns.
Yeah, it seemed like the Bolts were going to group up. They stepped over a ward, so the Camelot Kings know exactly where they are. And I was going to say, mate, just go for the right side Phoenix because two members of the Kings were over to the left. But, like I said, vision on the side of the Camelot Kings. They know exactly where the Bolts are, and they're going to back up. Get ready for this next Fire Giant. At the very least, the waves have been pushed out a bit. I mean, usually in this situation, the Olympus Bolts will sit back at fire, wait a bit for those minions, and the Camelot Kings are forced into a bad fight. But last game, that wasn't the case. I mean, it was in the same sort of style, but just going for the pull onto FG was the play because of how much damage you've got when you're in the lead. So the Olympus Bolts are in that position. They're waiting to see who will step up. But it looks like Variety gets caught out.
Variety has been caught out for nothing. Uses his ultimate. Netroid drop Fields of Love. Lasbra sent out the Typhoon. 5-0-2 on the Susano. And that's kind of made the decision for the Camelot Kings. Again, when I say disjointed and not consistent with the Kings that we're used to, it's stuff like that. They're just on different pages. Olympus Bolts, all 5, FG. Left side Phoenix is already gone. So are the tier 2 towers. Life has just been made easier for the Bolts.
Yeah, the Camelot Kings have to back immediately because here comes 5 Bolts heading up the right side of the map. Actually 4. Lasbra pushing up mid currently. Do you feel confident to step in 4v4? Probably not. Waiting for your jungler. The 5-0 Susano, by the way, probably the smart call. He's got over 50% of your team's kills. So now, I mean, just waiting. Wait for those fire minions on the left. You got 5 seconds before Variety's able to join the fight with that ultimate. Pillar of Agony not available for quite some time. So it's just going to be the 2-3 split. Lasbra and Baskin going to be winning any 2v2 in the mid lane, whereas the rest of the Bolts going over the right, trying to wait to see if Jake can set up something.
Decent split out of the Bolts. If you're the Kings, you're hoping for a miracle play at this point. Deficit has grown simply too big to just favor yourself in a 5v5, especially this early in the game when the build's not fully complete. Massive threat in Lasbra. Not only has the bubble, but close to full build there as well. Carries beware. None of them chose Aegis over Beads this game. Susano in one-shot territory, if left unattended. Suppose you're looking for the Blink, the Pillars of Agony. I mean, Twig has Blink, Variety has Blink. This is now maybe where the Bolts can really stretch out the map. Send Baskin over towards left. That's pulled Twig over. Lasbra dueling out with Variety, who turns some good damage back into the Susano. And the left side Phoenix once again crumbles. But the Kings have stood strong here underneath their Phoenix defense on right. Awesome Jake not going in with that Emperor's armor just yet.
Yeah, Baskin gets that left side bird, but I think Variety does a good job of trading evenly with Lasbra as well as having a ton of sustain of his own. Gets the bubble down and says, hey, you can go back in. I'm not going to make it easy for you. So the Olympus Bolts get to back up one more time. This time at least they've got Fire Giant for another 2 minutes, so they're able to grab the bird, reset, and then group back up. I saw a lot of power spikes on the left side of my screen. You got the Silver Branch, the Hydras, some power potions as well. A full breastplate for Awesome Jake, so plenty to be had, and I think the Olympus Bolts fight is only getting scarier. Gold lead sitting at about 10k, and Awesome Jake might be able to catch out Captain Twig or someone. But it looks like not going to be going for the Shadow Lock combo. Just going to be sticking around to see if anyone will step up a little bit too far. Variety's on the left side, so he's not even close. The Olympus Bolts should feel confident stepping up here, but playing slow and calculated is the call.
Still no Book of the Dead for Variety. Might be the last item purchase. Prioritizes a bit more damage with the poly first. Barracuda is starting to hit critical mass here as well. Any of those abilities going to melt targets down. With Basket over in mid. You are losing your Shogun's passive on the 2 carries, but are spreading out the Camelot Kings, which is maybe more valuable. I mean, you got Bracer down. If you're the Kings, I mean, you have burnt away a lot of this Fire Giant time and haven't lost any more of your map than you did on the first FG. Awesome Jake unhappy with the pace of things now. Double cripple fields down, and the Camelot Kings have found the first. They've found another one as well, and suddenly the Olympus Bolts spread apart. A double kill for big man Tings. It's only Lasbra and Jake, and it's disastrous for the Bolts. They lose almost everyone under the right side Phoenix.
This is like versus the Titans. What is happening? Why did Jake dash in towards the Phoenix? I mean, huge ultimate. Don't get me wrong, the Camelot Kings played it great, but I feel like even if the walls came through, Jake wasn't dead. He had his ultimate still. He had the CC immunity. Doesn't matter now. The Camelot Kings are going to run it down. Lasbra should be able to win this 1v1 versus Netroid if he walks up. But looks like smart call. Pinged it out. The Camelot Kings. I'm not sure who knew he was there, but someone did.
What can the Kings do? I mean, they've got 30 seconds on Jake. I mean, it's definitely not game end territory.
They can maybe go for the Phoenix, but it looks like they're not even going to do that. So I guess not the biggest throw. Could have been worse.
Goodness. Well, so what does that tell us, Charlie? That the Bolts are not confident in their Phoenix dive. I mean,
we were talking about disjointed. That looked very disjointed to me.
Yeah, those. You know what? It's the curse of the game lead. The Bolts pulled ahead in game 3, and now the Kings maybe confident underneath their Phoenixes. Feels like total world separation now, where the Kings felt confident in the way that they grouped under that right side Phoenix. Barely lost any damage. Did not lose any at all, as a matter of fact. Still waiting on that left Phoenix to come back. But now there's a tier system here. You're the Bolts. You're thinking, all right, we got to worry about potentially enhanced Fire Giant first. But how in the world, unless we win a fight around FG, are we going to break this base?
I mean, someone still has to defend left. So the Camelot Kings are going to have to commit someone to clear that wave because that Phoenix is already spawning back in.
Yeah, no one has teleport.
It seems like Captain Twig is going to be the call. He's going to ride the horse over, so he'll be there in no time. Awesome Jake sitting at the corner, waiting to see if anyone will step up and give him a free beads. Notably, Captain Twig doesn't have them. And Netroid down for about 40 seconds as well. It's going to be Variety, though, getting the beads down very early on. Basket wants to chase it, though.
Remember, Variety got caught out last time. Variety made the decision for the Camelot Kings. Book of the Dead. Oh, it's paid off. Tenfold for Variety. It's kept him on the map. Lots of ultimates sent out. Everyone but Twig has used their ult. And everyone remains on the map around this FG.
Yeah, but Genetics is getting chunked through as well. Good combo from Awesome Jake. Captain Twig made that rotation to the left side, but left a fire wave in the left side of the map as well. Someone's got to defend that, but not worried about it currently. Ven drops the bracer, and Fire Giant's getting started up.
Ven poking his damage in. A grouping of 5 Camelot Kings will round the corner. They will be rooted by Venenu. Variety will die first. Genetics will make it out as Captain Twig goes around the corner, gets the pick onto Basket, and an important trade out for the Olympus Bolts. As Twig then drops after the fact, the Fire Giant still stands, but so do 3 members of the Kings and 4 of the Bolts.
Left side Phoenix is dropping shortly unless someone from the Camelot Kings goes back. They're in a situation. Who's going to go? It looks like BMT should be able to make it, but I don't know if that... He's got the wave. He's got to ult it, right? I don't know. He doesn't have to.
No,
it looks like, he's got to wave it.
Yeah, he does. So he ults the wave. Relatively quick cooldown. Are we looking at steal potential? I'm not sure anyone from the Kings is going to get in range. They will not, and so the Olympus Bolts with a 2-for-1 fight crack open the enhanced Fire Giant. I wonder if that's the type of call where the Kings realize that their base defense has looked okay in the last couple FGs. Why roll the dice trying to steal it away? We'll see if we can keep this left side Phoenix alive next time.
I mean, I just think that the Olympus Bolts have a really great, you're walking up on us in the jungle composition where there's a knock sitting there.
Right.
If you step up too far, Lasbra pulls you as well. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. And also, the only real steal potential they had, if anyone else goes back, BMT is the only one that saves that Phoenix. I mean, Netroid didn't have ult. He can't clear the wave fast enough. There's no way Genetics even can fight fire minions, so probably the smart call to send BMT, let him ult it, and give up your EFG chances, because I think also what you were saying, They got to be confident fighting underneath their Phoenix. They've been doing it time and time again. It's sketchy, but hey, it's worked for them so far. They've got 3 birds up, and this is going to be a relatively, as far as the gold lead goes and as far as how much the confidence has shifted, this has got to be the most fair fight thus far if you take away the EFG, which is a tall ask because EFG does give a lot of stats. I mean, Baskin could essentially solo a Phoenix if he had it, but he doesn't. He was dead during that time, so only Lasbra is really going to be using the benefit.
Oh, no.
But once again, Variety.
Oh no. Oh no, who's gonna win this one? I'm not sure. Lasbra and Variety exchange ults, they exchange damage. But Book of the Dead, again a difference maker. But how do the Kings fare without their soul laner? How do the Bolts fare without their jungler? Oh my god! A nuke drops on Barracuda, but doesn't completely delete him. Forces the soul back and forces some sustain. I thought big man Tings might have had enough there, but no, Barracuda able to shrug it off and stay on the map.
Yeah, I think Variety made the rotation over finally. Doesn't have the ultimate, but it looks like this Phoenix is going to be the target. Baskin's charging in.
Been a quiet game from the Amaterasu. Now just separating out. What happened here? Oh my goodness. Didn't even realize Lasbro was in there with all of the Kings. Maybe the quietest somehow Phoenix Siege we've gotten. The Bolts drop the left side bird. Kings realize that one an easier task for the opposing squad because of just the health pool on it. And now it's the pesky right side or mid lane Phoenix that the Bolts have just not been able to figure out. Though they're going to be able to send the Kings over to left every once in a while to deal with the waves.
I was trying to figure out, you know, what itemization BMT would have to change to actually get the one shot on the Barracuda off that ultimate, but it looks like fully statted here. I mean, red buff and elixir of power, that's the only difference maker you could really make, and I believe even had the red buff at the moment. So the elixir of power is really all BMT can do if he wants to try and go for that one shot. It's been consistent, blink in from Genetics, wall into the ult. It's worked time and time again. That time it didn't kill and it didn't save the Phoenix, but certainly made the Olympus Bolts double take. Lasper goes to the back line. It was a decent 1v1 opportunity versus Captain Twig, but no kill netted.
Yep.
And it looks like the situation is full-on retreat here. Barracuda finally, I was going to say, where's the Obsidian chart? Only has 20% pen and has only had 20% pen this whole game. Looks like finally building into it, but might not even need the chance. Right side Phoenix goes, and once again, Ben drops that bracer.
Well, it's Jake waltzing forward. Again, though, Amaterasu over in mid. Twig knocked up by Lasbra. And a wall in from Genetics.
There
An
it is.
Earthshaker
Look at his
deletes
HP.
Benenu. Barracuda, red HP as well. It happens again. The Camelot Kings flex their muscles on the right side Phoenix. And they will repel the Olympus Bolts once more.
But it looks like Baskin going for the mid Phoenix, the Titan taking some damage as well. Lasper's sticking around here. This is not as easy as just push in and end the game. The Olympus Bolts are spreading out the utility that the Camelot Kings have. Netrun and Genetics trying to catch them out as well, but they can just run as much as they want to with the movement speed passive here from Ama. I'm not sure how much the Kings can get done, but Genetics does not have the blink to chase this. Only Captain Twig can close that gap. He's got ult.
I mean, you've already lost Fire Giant Buff anyway. Yeah, if you don't lose anything else, it's a relatively low cost defeat there for the Olympus Bolts. My goodness, Trelly. The Bolts just cannot get it done under the right side Phoenix. And then the Kings are smart because they're not trying to take fights anywhere else. They're realizing that they look just fine as long as that Earthshaker connects.
And Dave, I hate to be that guy, but I see a shell from Bear, that's fortifying shell, and a bracer from Ven.
Yeah.
If it's a phantom shell, you're getting away from that ult. I mean, we were talking about it during picks and bans. It's just, it seems like they weren't really concerned about the walls early game, but now Genetics is making all the difference setting up for BMT's ults. And these fortifying shells are not saving you from Earthshaker. It's just not happening.
And you know what? I mean, it's a difficult decision because, yes, those walls can break somewhat quickly. But if Tings puts the Earthshaker a bit behind the walls, they can break them, but then they still run into the Earthshaker. It's that moment of hesitation. And if they want to dodge it the other way, they're running into the Camelot Kings, the carries are. It's a no-win situation when you have to hesitate to break those walls. Now the Kings got to get it done around one of these FGs, though, or do they? Eventually, the death timer is going to be so long that you can defend your right side Phoenix and just win the game off of it. Now, left side Phoenix about to respawn.
They're not going for it, though. They're hiding in the mist.
The Fire Minions will finish it.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if Variety and Twig were going to make a play here. Because Ven has no relics for 30 seconds at least, no beads. Ishtar would be a great target for the 100-0 from Variety.
Back. Yeah.
I don't think they finally spotted him. Okay, they know
Yeah, they're
Variety's
just gonna
hiding.
get the Phoenix again.
Yeah, Twig's late. It's gone.
But the Olympus Bolt's not fast enough to immediately pull this enhanced Fire Giant. For Variety's been caught out a couple times around this FG. You're hoping to avoid that, avoids the route. Instead, Variety blinks back in towards Baskin. No more blink initiation from your Hades. Potentially a costly positioning choice from Variety over in the mid lane.
But the Camelot Kings are in the same position they were in. Whether or not the Phoenix is up is irrelevant. The Fire Minions are going to pour in if they don't decide to pull this Fire Giant. And it looks like they stepped up to see what they could find. Didn't find the initiation they were looking for.
It's funny.
And still, I mean, Captain Twig back to watch the Phoenix die, didn't clear the wave, and came back. So that wave is still there, and it's about to go to the Titan. It's not going to end the game, but left alone for a while will certainly start to pile
Slowly
up.
build it there. Eventually, the Bolts can stop caring about the right side Phoenix and just end the game if that Titan gets so low. But the Fire Giant now melted down by the Camelot Kings, and the Fire Giant confirmed by the Bolts. Big Man Ting's deleted just as your Shaker comes out. But Variety has done the same to Ven on the back line. Variety with a double kill cleans up both carries. And the Hades makes reparations for a dropped kill earlier on. What can the rest of the Kings do, though? Captain Twig has gone back to save the Titan. That's left the Bolts with 2 members of the Kings. A triple kill for Variety. It's left to Jake and Baskin to chase down the Hades. It's either a quad or escape for Variety as Jake will dash forward. Genetics left on the run, and Captain Twig has saved the Titan.
Yeah, Captain Twig had to go back there. Genetics should fall down here shortly, but Variety has stuck around. Just go back to base at this point, but now Captain Twig's here.
Captain Twig, could he tilt the scales right on back? Chaos descends over the battleground. Baskin uses the dazzling offensive and the beads out of Captain Twig. Fire Minions are going to make their way onto the Titan here shortly as well. It's a killing spree for Awesome Jake, and it's down to Variety. Fire Minions and half the HP on the Titan.
Yeah, Variety will have ultimate here shortly. You got to deal with Baskin, who's got an EFG, so it's not going to be easy, but BMT shows up. No way this bird goes down, right? As long as Big Man Ting's hit some abilities, that should be all she wrote for this Phoenix Siege. That Titan did get real low, though, Dave. We're in a situation where 1 or 2 bolts sneak into the Titan room, and that Titan's going down.
All right. Look, the problem is it's Baskin and Jake who have the FG buff.
Yep.
We are right back to square one as far as base siege goes, except now the Titan down to half. The question is, do the Bolts say, we're going to lose again on the right side, Phoenix? Do we just ignore the Phoenix? We have enough damage this late in the game to just finish off the Titan. And it looks like that might be the answer. The Camelot Kings have stood strong under the right side, Phoenix, and they won't have an answer under mid.
They've got to respect the damage coming from Big Man Tings. I mean, they realize they could get 100-0'd very easily. Even with the amount of HP that Titan is at, one good ultimate timed from this Vulcan could be the end. The call has got to be to go for the end, though. It's not looking for the right side Phoenix. It's group up and go for the Titan.
Bede's still down on a few members of the Bolts as well. Barracuda 30 seconds away. Lasbra, oh no, has he maybe just ended the game? He's at least given the Bolts a real good look, and Earthshaker hits absolutely no one. It's a big whiff. What can the Kings do now? Variety can dash onto Lasbra. Has Variety saved the game? No, Barracuda flips it right back. Genetics will use the walls, and it's going to be up to Netrioid, up to the carries, up to
so much
Taze,
damage!
up to the Cupid, and suddenly we're tilted right back. What in the world have the Camelot Kings done on defense? They have delayed the Bolts once more.
They've delayed them, but what can they get in the meantime? 2 members of the Kings have to go back and defend these fire waves, and Baskin still has EFG for at least another minute, so that left side Phoenix could essentially get one shot. We're back to square one once again. I mean, this is just a toss-up of a game. The Camelot Kings have not been in control for 20-plus minutes, but it does not matter. Their defense has been so strong off the back of Variety, who has been popping off on this Hades, trading out his life more often than not, but still getting the relics down, doing so much damage. It's been absurd. It's just been too much.
You know what? Square one, whatever entity it is tired of seeing us come back. You guys again? Again, you guys are back? This has been a tale of 2 map positions, right? Anywhere around the base of the Kings, except for the left side Phoenix, has felt overwhelmingly in favor of the Kings. Anywhere around the FG pit has just looked so good for the Bolts, and I think you talked about it earlier, Trilly, just the way the Bolts comp is built, catching someone out, winning the fight that way, whereas maybe the Kings, if you can funnel the targets in, feel a bit better off. Now, an important note is the Titan hasn't been able to heal up at all because the Phoenixes have been down.
King's got the 3K though. Now that ult's one-shot in Barra. No longer will he live on 1 HP. He is gone if that ultimate connects.
God, the moment that Earthshaker missed on defense last time, I thought it was over as well. I'm thinking, where's this damage going to come from? The Bolts have just had such a hard time figuring out how to fight. Once they crossed the threshold of the Camelot Kings Phoenix line, but they felt just fine in these jungle fights. Now you're talking about mispositioning. And remember, to set the stage, you're talking about each of these teams having 4 sets remaining this phase. You're talking about teams on the edge of top 2, bottom 2. This is like pre-Worlds level of importance for both the Bolts and the Camelot Kings as far as standings, what teams are going to be going up against who come phase 3 playoffs, are even going to make it. If the Bolts drop a few and the Valks pick up some, these are the games you feel like you have to win. The Camelot Kings, Trelly, and the Bolts both have a fantastic opportunity to win things here. Mid lane Phoenix, a lot easier to deal with for the Kings. We'll send Variety over and rotate him in after.
Yeah, certainly is the call. Now Genetics could be in some trouble already.
Oh.
Cut out, but Baskin is getting deleted. The turret's gonna kill him.
Oh, God, oh no, Baskin, he's left running. Terrified, screaming to the hills. Variety now. Look, all the map positioning in favor of the Camelot Kings. Ultimates, though, still there for the Bolts. Jake walks forward. Big man Tings with no Earthshaker. Baskin's behind. Baskin just teleported behind the Camelot Kings. I'm not sure they know he's there. They do now. The middle Phoenix respawns. And so you're looking at Relics being down, you're looking at Lasbra going in on an Etrioid, and you're looking at Genetics and Etrioid!
The shell's
waving goodbye to Lasbra! But is Genetics gonna die off as well? He sure is, and it's a 1-for-1 trade by the FG pit.
Variety and Captain Twig are still here. The ultimates are down. Etrioid was able to make it out, and it looks like Variety has to back up here. All Phoenixes are standing, and the Olympus Bolts, they're not concerned about the EFG anymore, at least for the time being. They're trying to chase out.
Well, if you don't have Laz,
they're trying to see what they can do in the meantime. Finally.
Or you lose kind of that insta-delete factor, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 4v4, and it looks like Variety still has access to the Blink ult. Everything's available. That's the main threat. I'd say this favors the Camelot Kings, right? Their mid Phoenix is up. They're back with the map positioning, and they're towards this Fire Giant once again. Awesome Jake goes for it, gets the beats up. Variety blinks in.
Variety blinks and dashes, but now he's on the wrong side of the fight. Earthshaker! Oh my God!
Big man Tings!
A nuclear bomb drops on the map, and Big Man Tings eviscerates the Olympus Bolts. That has got to be the advantage for the Kings. That has got to be a Fire Giant pull. He bought his time, and he hits it. BMT massive at the end of game 3.
I'm telling you, man, it was the 3K pot. That's all they needed. Big Man T's like, man, every time I hit Barra, he lives with 1 HP. How do I get some more damage? He found it.
And onto the carries.
Yeah,
My
Ben
God.
and Barra. They said, group up. Let's get together for this big explosion that comes through. And now it's time for the Camelot Kings. The first time in this game, grouped up to try and break the base. There's still a tier 1 tower up, Dave. This is the first time the Camelot Kings have had pressure, and now they're looking towards this right side Phoenix.
There's been no answer from the Bolts around the Kings base. Do the Bolts have an answer around their own base, or has this game been flipped? At 45 minutes, death timers trickling down for Barracuda and Ven, just shy of 10 seconds. They lose the right side Phoenix. Far from game ending. Can easily defend that when the next FG comes back up. It does make life a bit more difficult. And it looks like the Kings have min-maxed their initial advantage, taken EFG and a kill onto both the carries, turn that into a right side Phoenix.
So if square 1 is the Olympus Bolts having 1 Phoenix down and trying to push in, if it's flipped, is this is square -1?
We're on square. Oh, you're right. If we're going back the other direction, by that logic, yes, we're on square -1.
Where it's the same,
or
but it's different.
we're on square A, which is a starting point just on a different series of squares,
on
right?
a completely different series.
The gold is even for the first time in 20 minutes.
I need this tower to go down. It's actually bugging me. The fact that the Camelot Kings are 46 minutes into this
The left
game with
side tier one.
EFG,
Yeah.
and the left side tier 1 is still standing. At the very least,
Wow.
Barracuda can say he won lane, right? Because that tower will stand tall
Yeah,
for
yes,
at least.
yeah.
Barra said, "Hey, no one got my tower till 46 minutes into the game. I
That's
gotta be
right.
doing something right
Yeah, you have to be.
on the soul."
Man, if the Bolts end up losing this one, you're looking back at like 4 attempted base sieges that you couldn't get anything done. Titan was as low as half thanks to fire minions. The fire minions did more to the Titan than the Bolts have been able to do so far this game. Now it simplifies again.
Yep.
But it's the Camelot Kings on the front foot. It's the Olympus Bolts hoping to avoid an Earthshaker, an Earthbreaker, a Will Breaker. And that last team fight broke the brains of the Olympus Bolts. The sheer amount of insta-gib damage that we just saw. Like fire to paper was Big Man Tings in the last fight. Look how far back that Vulcan is. It's going to be hard for Lasbra to get back there and affect some change.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the call, right? If Lasbra does go that deep, Variety's able to grab the Phoenix for free, though, so it looks like leaving the Olympus Bolts to themselves on the left side of the map is going to be the smart call here. Basket and Lasbra with the 2v2. They're going to lose this eventually just by nature of Phoenix procs, and that's going to go down. The Polynomicon helping out with mid-Phoenix. Right Phoenix is already down. All 3 birds are in danger of sieging here. I mean, Olympus Bolts, they got to try and fight eventually, and a bear gets chunked.
Is it now, though? Netroid is low, but so is Barracuda. Fire minions are going to make their way in. Variety back by the Titan as well. I mean, is this death by indecision from the Olympus Bolts? They have not drawn the line anywhere. And now Variety's just waltzing his way in. Big Man Tings is killed off. Then, in the most miraculous way possible, this game could end in a sputter. Venenu has been killed off as the Bolts have separated. But now, Lasbra will try, the Camelot Kings will triumph. And at the end of Game 3, it's Barracuda clinging to hope. But is hope enough? It sure isn't. The Camelot Kings take Game 3 in 48 minutes.
I mean, BMT and Variety had just a fantastic game here. And it just seemed like it was just the Earthshakers that was keeping the dream alive. But then BMT missed the ult completely, and you're like, all right, where's the damage coming from? Netroid and Variety were able to combo as well. This Hades, 3 times we saw it, and this was the best performance out of Variety through all 3 of these games.
But again, but it was like at the end. Right? It was, well, end is
The end 25 minutes
right,
ago?
Right, the
yeah,
last 25 minutes of this game. It took forever for this Hades to be like, all right, we're there. It got picked out. Think of the first, 2 fire giants we saw kept getting picked out.
That's true.
I was thinking that was game-ending type of moments. Defense stood way too strong for the Camelot Kings. Shakes things up once again in the standings. We are so grouped up in the middle there. With the Valhalla Valkyries, Solar Scarabs, the teams with outside hopes at breaking into the top 6, real happy with this result. The Camelot Kings get back to their winning ways, though. Not without a little bit of drama. What a way to end this set. Camelot Kings on top of the Bolts. That's it for Trelly and I. We'll go back to the desk to break this one down.
Man, that was not an easy game for the Camelot Kings by any stretch of the imagination, Mifflin. Having to do with 3, 4, 5 Phoenix sieges from the Bolts, and the only bird they were able to take with no problem at any given time was the left side Phoenix. But that kryptonite of the right Phoenix for the Olympus Bolts made it so difficult for them to break into that base. Big Man Tings and Genetics comboing up to find Wall to lock in for Earthshakers. And then finally we get the performance that we've been waiting for out of Variety on this Hades. Took them 3 games to get there. But man, what a performance that Variety and the Camelot Kings had on that defense. And it's just that massive Earthshaker to take both Venenu and Barra off the field immediately.
Multiple massive Earthshakers,
Oh, yeah.
right? I mean, he was removing people with tac nuke. I guess he was just holding on to the nuke codes for 30 entire minutes and then eventually decided, hey, we could just do it. And he did, man. That was impressive stuff from the Camelot Kings. But I think it is worth saying, given 4 attempts to break the base with Fire Giant, that game might be considered fumble territory for the Olympus Bolts. The Kings, of course, deserve every bit of credit to be able to repel as many pushes as they did, but when you give up that many opportunities, you just got to think maybe one of them is going to stick to the wall.
And I mean, until the last like 10 or so minutes, that was a fight on two fronts. The Olympus Bolts are winning every single jungle fight imaginable. Every time that the Kings step into the jungle, the Bolts are winning that. But every time the Bolts step into Kings territory at the Phoenix, it's the Kings winning that. And so it's just this constant back and forth battle in there until finally one Fire Giant fight goes the way of the Camelot Kings. It opens the door a little bit more and makes things a little bit easier. The game evens out by that point. Everybody's full build. And then I think while Trelly was kind of jokingly with it, we get a 3K pot on Big Man Tings, and suddenly it's no longer Venenu or Barra living with 10% HP or 5% HP. He's now
HP.
just officially one-tapping all of them. And we got the man himself, Big Man Ting, standing by for our post-game interview.
That's right, BMT, mid laner for the Camelot Kings, standing by with me now for the post-game interview. BMT, you walk in here, I hear a sigh of what I assume to be some relief here. This is a 48 or so minute game here in Game 3. Was that a sigh that Game 3 was over, or that the Kings were able to get another win under their belts? Is it a feeling of relief after that one?
Yeah, I think it's just a general feeling of relief. It was definitely a tough set. We did not play well today at all. But I'm honestly glad we got the dub on the dock. It just didn't feel that great, sadly. But hopefully we can improve for our next set.
Yeah, point me to a couple things that maybe stand out to you here today, because the Bolts an improving team, but a set where you know, admittedly you don't think went exactly your way. What are some things that stand out that you want to improve on after this one?
I think just the no Aegis thing right now is just pretty hard for us to adjust. I think a lot of teams are a lot more proactive than us, and having no Aegis can really affect that, sadly. So hopefully we can sort that out before our next set and have a little bit of a better showing.
Well, look, you're able to grab a win here, keep pace with some of the top of the standings. Now, Game 3, with how chaotic that was, you got yourself back on the Vulcan. Took a little while to get there. I remember there was one ult. Hell, it was like the 30-minute mark. You hit Barra, but it didn't totally kill him, and we were like, when is he finally going to be able to insta-gib a couple of these carries? 3K pot maybe makes the difference here, Tings. Were you just waiting for this moment to finally strike, and you knew you had your advantage?
A lot of damage. Yeah, I mean, the Vulcan ult's pretty... That was like 2.4K. Yeah, it's pretty good. Honestly, once you get 3K on Vulcan, you are just going to one-shot carries with no Aegis. There's not much I can really do about it, even with Shell and stuff. So it did feel pretty confident once we got that 3K pot, but yeah, I don't know.
I do have to ask, because that game did stretch on forever. Felt like the Bolts had like 4 chances at cracking the base. Do you feel like your comp was just built better around base defense, or do you think there were some moments where the Bolts maybe chose the wrong way of going about their siege?
I feel like they defo through. I think our comp is pretty good at base defense, though. Having Vulcan in this kind of meta is just very good at dealing with that. But I think like we definitely are pretty lucky to get away with the win there. So.
Well, look, you get the win. One more on the win column. It was a lot of fun to watch. You get the massive highlight reel ult as well. Thanks for your time. Congrats on the win. We'll go back to the desk to finish out the day.
Yeah, strong performance out of BMT and the Camelot Kings to kind of reel Game 3 back and really kind of bring this set back for themselves. Because remember, you dial all the way back to game number 1. Olympus Bolts are winning this one pretty handedly. Camelot Kings turn it around about the 25 or so minute mark, take game 1. Camelot Kings then start winning game number 2. Olympus Bolts turn it around and win game number 2. And another similar situation where the team that's winning out in the early game isn't quite getting it done to the late game, and it's the opposite team ends up coming back through, and Camelot Kings able to find it there. Great combos between Genetics and Big Man Ting setup ultimates, between Variety finding massive ultimates when we start getting these 30, 35-minute team fights. I think even a triple kill around the Fire Giant at one point that really kept that team in. And at one point, we see Captain Twig walk in after coming off of a death to say, hey, let's just keep the fight going a little bit longer to delay the game as much as you can. But, I mean, the man on the screen right here, Big Man Tings, a lot of credit to this man for slamming these ultimates. I think you put it best. In a no Aegis meta, it's not a matter of, okay, well, I just press one button, I live. This is, I need to be out of this area at this point.
You need to be able to use a leap to avoid these situations, or just grab a shell and use it at the right time, or any number of ways to counterplay, but couldn't quite find it. And it is a lot more likely that you find these massive ultimates when you can't just press a button and immune to every bit of damage that comes your way. Camelot Kings, I think, BMT says it himself best, though. This is a game that I think he is right to say a bit of luck involved in the win. The Olympus Bolts, 4 or 5 Phoenix Siege attempts just come up empty, and every single time the Camelot Kings aren't able to do anything on map except for delay the game until eventually plays like this completely changed the face of the match. I thought it was GG immediately. I was surprised to even see the Kings like go for towers. I was thinking EFG mid Phoenix, let's go for the end, but instead cooler heads prevail, and the Camelot Kings show, I suppose, shades of what we're used to seeing from them. Slow, methodical, classic Kings play to end out the game. Unfortunately for the Kings, it was just 40 minutes of not that beforehand.
Yeah. Big Man Tings, though, just with that one ultimate alone, put up about 4,800 of his 38,000 that he does in this game. And I'm honestly surprised that it's only 38,500 damage and that he just barely beat out Variety by the end of the game. At the end of all of that one there, though, Camelot Kings, a well-fought victory for themselves and a much-needed one for them after coming out of their previous week of the SPL 0-2. As far as the matches are concerned, a 2-1 loss to the Dragons, a 2-1 loss to the Valkyries. Definitely a little bit tough on the team. So even though it wasn't the cleanest win, even though that may not have been the best performance from the Kings to find a win, any win matters to try and keep themselves in that top 4 and try and get the momentum back for this team moving forward.
And they found it, a massive win up against the Olympus Bolts. So the Camelot Kings primed and ready to continue climbing the standings, and it's good to hear from Big Man Tings himself that this is a squad that is looking to constantly improve, even in a win, not happy with their performance, and will probably very likely go home tonight and review the VOD and figure out what exactly they could have changed to make that a bit easier of a dub for themselves. But nonetheless, the Camelot Kings getting a bit back in form.
Maybe the good news for both of these teams out here is it's not their only match to be played. We'll be seeing the Kings and the Bolts a little bit later in the week as we take a look at the schedule. Today's matchups, Oni Warriors 2-0 over the Valhalla Valkyries. Camelot Kings a 2-1 over the Olympus Bolts. And make sure you tune in tomorrow at 11 a.m., not our 1 p.m. that we've been starting at these last couple of days, 11 a.m. We'll start things out with the Leviathans and the Scarabs, Titans and Valkyries, and then the Warriors and the Jade Dragons. And on Sunday, we'll get to see these two teams again, the Olympus Bolts and the Leviathans, Scarabs, Kings, and Dragons, Titans. We'll round out this remaining week of the SPL, and then there'll be one more week happening after that. And with the standings, Camelot Kings, who were sitting at that 4th after the win from the Oni Warriors just previously, now Camelot Kings back up in that top 3 spot for themselves, only 1 game behind the Jade Dragons as far as the standing is concerned out there. Olympus Bolts still 1 behind the Tartarus Titans, so they're still sitting right at that break point. And again, every single one of these games is so important for the Bolts to try and find those wins, and also for Bolts and Bolts fans hoping that the Valhalla Valkyries don't find success out there, because it's now only 2 games, 2 matches that are separating these two teams from potentially fighting over that 6th seed spot as the season continues through and as the phase rounds itself out and we start getting to that Phase 3 playoffs. It's very important for the Olympus Bolts and the Valkyries to try and find every single win they can to keep that top 6 spot.
Maybe it's the Valkyries who benefit the most from the outcome of this set, right? Making sure the Olympus Bolts don't veer out of striking distance of the Valkyries so that there's still at least an opportunity to break out of the bottom 2. The Valkyries, of course, don't come out with a win today, but I'm sure keeping their heads on straight and trying to make sure that they have the best end of the season as possible as we gear up for Worlds.
Oh, actually, very poetic. Is the last match, not one that's going to be happening this week, it'll be next week. The last match of the season for both of those teams is against each other. So with some of the matchups that we have remaining here, it could lead to be a very fun final week of the SPL. But again, make sure that you tune in tomorrow, 11 a.m. to catch our 3rd of the 4 days of the SPL. But on behalf of myself, Mifflin, casters, and everyone behind the scenes, thanks for watching, and we'll see you for day 3 of the week.